Welcome back, everyone, as we move on to the second set of the day. I'm still sitting here on the desk with you, but joining me around this time is going to be none other than Mifflin. You just got to watch a pretty fun three-game set. And Mifflin, I have a sneaking suspicion that, you know what, we might just be in line for another one coming up here.
Both of these teams are so strong, and there's a lot of parity in how they play. Both teams have been struggling a little bit in the duo lane. They've been having consistency issues, I would say, and both teams have been having a lot of success playing through the mid laners. Dardes and BM team of Big Man Tings, rather, my bad, have been stepping up towards the second half of this split. I think that this set very likely will go 3 games.
It'll be interesting to see, as you see there. These teams are, well, pretty close to each other as it stands. I mean, 7-3, 6-4, so same number of games played. This one could be the difference of a three-way tie for first, or SSG maybe taking that little bit of a lead, and actually tying Radiance with the Knights down there, and that's maybe where the biggest conversation is, and we can get to Radiance a little bit later considering what we've seen out of them. But looking at the standings, it is important to keep in mind that playoffs are going to be playing a big role in this. The first and second teams up at the top, they get a bye round, and the bottom 2 teams in the SBL don't go. So for SSG, this is a pretty important one to win and maybe kind of set yourself apart from the pack to get ahead early.
If memory serves and my math isn't bad, and it almost certainly is, if SSG come out with the first seed going into playoffs, I believe coming in with first seed essentially guarantees you at least a 4th place spot. So that's going to be a huge deal. SSG definitely want to maintain this leader of the pack situation, and they're playing incredibly well recently. They're on a huge heater. They're coming over off of a 2-1 over PK, a 2-1 over Sanguine. This is a team that had a pretty stellar start, slowly declined towards the mid part of the season, and now they're slowly rising again towards the top. And if they continue playing at their absolute best, I think that's exactly what they are, the absolute best.
As long as they can keep up this amount of performance, things are going to be looking really good for them. But I actually, wanted to talk to you about it because, looking at it now, fan vote, it's not in favor of SSG, even though we've seen them be pretty successful here in the past couple of weeks. But a lot of that has maybe come around the jungler, Cherio, being able to kind of come through and maybe be more impactful than what we've seen. A lot of versatile picks. How in-depth and important do you think he is to maybe making SSG work out?
I think Cherio, a lot of what he brings to the field isn't in the game. It's not on the screen what you get to see. From interviews from each one of the players, every single time we see that Cherio is constantly trying to promote his team, trying to make sure that they stay focused, keep their heads in the game. SSG to me is the team of overachievers. Each one of them might have been that smart kid in school who didn't really try, and I think they bring that mentality and they become complacent when they're at the top for so long. And Cherio is constantly trying to keep their heads in the game, constantly keep them focused and succeeding, and I think that's a huge asset to have on your squad.
Well, I know, after looking at the jungler, you actually earlier mentioned some maybe issues around the duo lane for Spacestation Gaming, but just as important and maybe even more dominant for some of the late game fights that we've seen out of them is going to be the solo lane. Nika here has been very important for Spacestation Gaming, and we are actually ready to get a couple of words from him before this match to see where Spacestation are feeling about themselves.
That's right, I do have the solo laner here for Spacestation, Nika, joining me. And Nika, the first thing I want to ask you about, man, you guys had the doubleheader last weekend. You won it up against Sanguine and the Knights. Do you all feel like there's any extra pressure or difficulty when you come into those weeks where you got 2 big sets?
Definitely, because obviously you don't have that much time to prepare from set to set. And knowing when you have like 2 in the same week, you have to put in double the work. You have to make sure you're ready for both teams, and you adapt your style for each team. And I think we did really well last week. Probably the best week we had in terms of looking as strong as we did last year. So things are going well.
I agree, and that was exactly what I was going to ask you about next. Is that refocusing you all talked about in your interviews before? It seems to be working. Is that what you sort of attribute it to? That everyone's kind of buckled down on a game plan a little bit more so here in these last few weeks, or what's been the cause of that turnaround?
Yeah, pretty much what you said, and just playing better overall is each of us individually have improved as well. We got back to the level we know we can play at, and like you said, the refocus on scrimming more seriously and prepping with game plans is I think the main reason we're playing well now, I'd say.
Hey, I think we all knew you guys could probably flip that switch at any time. You're gonna be playing up against Radiance here next, man. And it seems like the game plan against this team has been to kind of bully the duo lane. Is that similar for you guys, and do you think that strategy's been working?
It's hard to say. I think last time we played him, we tried to play around duo lane, but we like lost later on in the games. So like maybe we'll adapt to that and play around solo, which is like what we did against Sanguine and PK kind of. But it all depends on like on the drafts and how we're feeling on the day. I think like we can adapt to either side of the map if we have to.
Well, you all have managed to get up there and tie that first spot as well. I mean, we're still kind of in the beginning of the first half of the season. How much do you all worry about, I suppose, where you are in the standings at this point? Or do you guys have a little bit of pride in that, in being up there for that first spot?
I mean, it feels good, but you have to be realistic that, like, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you just have to, like, you have to stay humble, right? Like, even if you're first seed by a mile, like any team can come in at like the playoff tournament and beat you. So you always have to be looking to improve, even if you're winning every game.
Well, it sounds like you all are sticking to that renewed focus to me, Nika. Thanks for taking some time to talk to me, man, and good luck in this next match.
Thanks.
I actually love the mentality that they leave us with there for SSG. Even though you're winning everything that might come your way, you still have to be careful because upsets exist. And that is the conversation, maybe not just around Spacestation now that they're at the top, but maybe a little bit around Radiance, Mifflin, because it is that conversation of super team, big egos. Will they clash? Will they not with Radiance? I mean, nobody seems to have any misgivings about where they are in the standings. Everyone seems to be willing to learn. But do you think SSG are maybe just a different beast right now?
Maybe not a different beast, but maybe they're starting to achieve that level of beastliness that they were really expected to. At the beginning of the year, I think everyone had really high expectations for SSG, but the same can be said of Radiance. This is a squad of Hall of Famers. I mean, Benji, Adapting, Big Man Ting, Cyclone Spin, Aurora, all of these guys have been hailed as the best or are currently hailed as the best. And they've earned that position very well, but they haven't been working as cohesively recently. Cyclone Spin last week said that he felt like they were in a bit of a slump, and if that slump continues this week, they could fall towards middle of the pack in the standings.
And you had actually mentioned the duo lane, and you know, Finch mentioned it, and Nika talked about it just a little bit. But the Raffer vote versus Aurora Cyclone specifically matchup, is it going to be the most important matchup of this game? I mean, a lot of teams have bullied Radiance down over there. Is that where SSG win, or do they need to maybe look towards, you know, things like keeping Dardes on these weird picks like the Hera that are working out for SSG?
I think SSG should certainly stick to their plan, and if they came in planning to shut down that duo lane, absolutely pursue that avenue of success. But if you're planning to play around Dardes as you have been in the past, don't worry about Radiance's duo lane. We've seen already that they've been playing incredibly inconsistently. Aurora's been getting boxed out a lot once he doesn't land himself a Hercules pick. Cyclone Spin's been having a very rough couple of weeks these last couple of weeks, hasn't quite had the standout performance that we really expect from him. So you might as well rely on your strengths if you're SSG. The same can be said of Radiance as well. They've been able to very easily play through Adapting and BMT. So if SSG decide to match that energy and play through their jungler and mid as they have been doing in the past, this could be a very decisive game in the 3v3 towards the center of the map.
One of the more important factors that we've seen out of them, again, when it comes to late game and setup, it's none other than Benji, one of the most consistent solo laners that we've gotten to see, and we actually have him standing by, again, for a thought process, or at least a glimpse into the thought process here of Radiance, as they take on the #1 team in the SPL right now.
Well, I do indeed have Benji here, the solo laner for Radiance. And the first thing I want to ask you about is you just had that setup against Obey last week, and obviously that first game was tough, but games 2 and 3, it looked like you guys kind of flipped a switch. What started clicking for you guys in those last 2 games to really get that rhythm going?
For the most part, our game 1 draft there was just terrible. So we kind of just, decided that we needed to step it up a bit. Made sure that all of our comps actually, made sense. And then,
Well, that's a good point, really, is how much of how the game goes is determined by the picks and bans. Like, how much would you weight it if you had to weight that part of the game in terms of its importance?
This is something a lot of people disagree on, but for me, I feel like you can literally go into any game and look at it and be like, we could have played X, Y, and Z better. But in pretty much every game, you can go into it and be like, if our draft was, this much better, if we weren't playing these picks, then, those situations might have never even happened. So I, I'd weight it pretty heavily towards drafting. I'd say a lot of games are won in drafts, and it's really underrated.
I agree. I think a lot of people don't realize kind of how much those end up impacting the whole rest of the game. Well, it's been a bit up and down for you guys, Benji, I feel like this year, but you're still doing well, still 6-4, tied for second. But you in particular, I think, have played really well all year long. Do you agree with that, Reed, that you've been consistent? And if so, what's led to you being able to play at that high level game in and game out?
I don't think I've been too consistent. But I don't know. Like in general, solo lane isn't that difficult this year, and the none of my matchups are that crazy. Like for the most part, I don't really struggle versus any of the other solo laners, so it's been pretty easy.
Well, you all are playing up against Spacestation, and they've been looking really good these last couple of weeks. They won their doubleheader last week. Have you noticed any change in them that you all are worried about in particular, or are you guys going to head into this one kind of business as usual?
Well, the first time we played them, it was really easy. But since then, they've kind of gotten their, act together. So, we'll see how it goes, but I'm not really too worried about it. I think we have a pretty good matchup versus their team.
Well, the last thing I want to ask you about, man, is I feel like other teams have been kind of deliberately trying to bully Cyclone, Spin, and Aurora over there in the duo lane. Is that something that you all have noticed and tried to adapt to, or is that maybe just something only a couple of teams have tried and you're not really worried about it in particular?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, that's one of the things we've been trying to work on, is like one of our weak points is just, making sure we're getting them through laning phases. But yeah, should be good.
Sounds like it's something that should be going well for you all. Appreciate you taking some time to talk to me, Benji. Always good to hear from you, my man. Good luck in your next match.
Yeah, thank you.
For someone whose gameplay is so loud when they're able to control and dominate the game, he's such a soft-spoken fellow there, that Benji. But it sounds like they are in a pretty healthy mindset going into this SSG matchup. And well, Mifflin, I mean, without really going further through much, we might as well go ahead and start looking to go forward towards picks and bans for game number 1 as Spacestation look to take on Radiance here. Is there any, god that maybe stands out to you first and foremost as something one of these teams should go for?
Well, we're talking about Aurora, so get rid of Hercules. We're talking about Dardes. Maybe don't let this man have Aphrodite. For my money, I think he's had the best performance on that god in the league. Outside of that, Benji getting the King Arthur is something you might want to avoid, but Radiance take it off the table themselves. There's a lot that you can look to target out here, but I think it should be more about each of these teams trying to facilitate picking gods that fit their playstyle. We saw that earlier on, both supports have incredibly aggressive playstyles, but recently, Raffer's shifted his focus towards a more facilitator style. He goes towards this Khepri, he goes towards the Geb, something like that. I think if SSG is able to pick through that and then allow Cherio to play a hyper carry as he has been, and to get that Khepri online, that might be a way that SSG wins. Maybe it's something Radiance has to be aware of.
Well, so far 2 of the gods you called out have been banned by Radiance themselves, the Aphrodite taken away, King Arthur as well. And even though it's a 62% ban rate against Radiance, Hercules isn't in the top 3 there for Spacestation Gaming, so either they pick it or maybe they risk it going over there to Radiance and letting Aurora kind of have his way in the duo lane. But the Merlin, Yamoja, Camazotz, as well as that Uller, 4 of the top picks that have been through. Also, just an interesting note, Camazotz is the second most picked god on Radiance. It just whether that's them playing first pick really well or teams just not banning it against them. Either way, I think they're happy with that kind of stat line because, well, usually Camazotz equals win. It's the Jing Wei that comes through first, one of the safer hunters that comes in. And honestly, not surprising to see her come in this early, but to give up, as you had pointed out, the Hercules, but now most importantly, one of the most notable combinations in SMITE, adapting Thor, seems a little risky.
Yeah, giving up Thor in general is always going to be risk. Oh, love that ROM pick. That's my favorite god in the game. Just got to gush a little bit there. Giving up Thor to adapt King might be a bit of a misplay, but Radiance taking it away from Cherio, Thor being one of his favorite pickups, is fantastic here. Jing Wei is going to have a degree of safety against this Thor, CC immunity on the ultimate, safety inside the lane. Maybe they're not too worried about it SSG and they want to leave vote on this island and just farm out safely and then have Raffer rotate out early. Cherio going for that early Kali pickup, though. That's interesting.
I got to say it in the last set. When I think Cherio, I think Kali, and maybe vice versa. When I think Kali, I think Cherio, because sometimes there's also an Athena. That's a very weird part of my brain, and maybe just a weird part of Cherio that comes out occasionally. But they grabbed that one, so maybe screaming for a little bit more late game in their composition, especially along with the Hera, which we have seen kind of dominate specifically around Dardez's use of Argus and how much that's been able to control. Going up against, more than likely, this Agni that was just locked in for Radiance, do you really like what Hera can bring here?
I think Hera brings a degree of safety, the shielding, the self-peel, and having your bubble buddy in Argus to just walk around with you, being able to self-peel by polymorphing an entire enemy team if you so choose, and the damage output, it's all there. Hera's not a god that we often see picked by any other team, but Dardez has seen so much success on it through his incredibly passive playstyle. He's always playing incredibly far back in these team fights, and they leverage it incredibly well as well. Having this Kali diving the back line, having this Jing Wei as another target of aggression means that Hera should be able to at least only have to deal with 2 or 3 divers instead of 5 people looking directly at him.
Well, just like you did your homework, it seems like Radiance, and so far Spacestation Gaming did theirs as well. Kepri and Geb, a lot of the facilitators you had kind of highlighted for Raffer, taken off board in the second phase of bans. And the Xingqian alongside the Hercules, a lot of the aggressive picks that Aurora likes to bring forward, taken off on the other side. So maybe taking away a little bit from the setup that will be around this ROM. And this is a very, very weird position for me to be in to ask this. But Amaterasu doesn't really flex too much outside of that solo lane. Occasionally we've seen her in the jungle, but there's a Thor here, so there's no chance of that. But what are the odds that this is another warrior support maybe trying to go in and help this ROM out?
If this were the 408, I'd say there's maybe an 80% chance we get that Ama in the long lane. But I think it's fair to guess that we're probably going to see her head over to solo. She's going to be able to establish lane dominance, rotate out very easily with the additional movement speed in her kit, safety and the CC immunity in the ultimate. Ama's home truly is in that short lane where she can box whoever she wants to. And Yorm, that's a pretty easy lane to take. You have the sustain advantage, you have the rotation advantage, you can get involved a lot earlier on. If Yorm decides to go this more damage-centric build, that's where I'm excited to see. That's what I'm always looking out for now that Ducky's shown it to us, because we've seen now that it's not just a backline disruptor, it's a backline eliminator.
And that's something that could be huge here, not just for SSG, but for Nika specifically being able to come through. I mean, I'm going to steal a quote from Aggro here and say one of the best things Yorm does is he just kind of doesn't lose. He maybe doesn't take control, but we might be seeing that switch around. They get the Ganesh, so a little bit more setup. This Terra locked in here. Who you feeling in game 1 has maybe a little bit more of an advantage?
If this game goes 30 minutes, we'll give it to SSG. If Radiance gets off to a good start, I think I will give it to Radiance. If they establish a 4,000 gold lead before the 15-minute mark, SSG is going to have a very hard time clawing their way back in because their team comp really is late game centric.
Kali can use her arms as the hands of a clock because she's a ticking time bomb here for Radiance. It's a race against that time to try and figure out if they can take game number 1. So without further ado, let's jump down to Finch and Aggro. Take it away.
Thanks, Gordon Mifflin. It is indeed Finch and Aggro here as we move on to the final set of the day. It's SSG up against Radiance, a clash of the Titans. And for this clash, look at these mid lane picks. They're letting Dardez have Hera, what has become one of his signature picks, and Big Man Tings flexing down to the Agni.
Yeah, it's interesting that Dardez is really the only one piloting this Hera, and they're willing to top 3 it so often, but it's just been so successful that I think at this point, if you're Dardez, you just keep picking it until someone shows you that they've got a good counter to it and that they're comfortable against it, and then you can move on to bigger and better things. But for the time being, may as well keep jamming that Hera every single game. I think that it fits with what Spacestation likes to do, which is snowball their 3v3 early on, really lean on that 3v3 core, and it gives you a little bit more early pressure and damage than something like the Kali is going to provide. I think that Hera doesn't really have a part of the game where she feels absolutely dominant, but she also doesn't have that many parts of the game where she feels that bad either. She's kind of just good all the time. No problems for her really at any stage of the game.
Dardes has really, I feel like, been able to find a whole new way to sort of use this god, or at least a whole new area in which he's strong. I mean, is there anyone else you'd be nervous if they lock this pick in the SPL right now? I mean, I kind of feel like no. It's just his thing that he's really making work here for the squad. He gives them this extra sort of beefy presence in the Argus that really allows them to be aggressive the way they like to play. So it's been big for him that he's been able to unlock this extra pick. I mentioned the Agni for Tings there too, and that's just because I just can't believe we don't see more Agni. I genuinely feel like there might just be too many gods that are good that we're not going to get to see all of them. And I think Agni is one of those gods that could be played more.
I agree at some level, but at the same time, there are just a lot of games where you fall behind as Agni and you feel like you're just not even a character anymore. It's just not a god that plays from behind particularly well because he really relies on base damage more than scaling necessarily. And so when you're falling behind, it doesn't really feel particularly good. Nothing feels worse than triple bombing a support and then walking away at like 60% HP. That feels horrible. But when you get ahead on this character, he pushes leads better than just about anybody. If you just think you're the best player in the lobby and you're playing mid lane and ranked or something like that, Agni's a great place to go because you just can dominate lanes. You always have solo kill potential. You always have team fight potential. And that's the thing that I think Radiance has really drafted here is team fight potential between this Agni and the Thor and the Amma and the Terra. I mean, these are just great team fighting gods. And while Spacestation might have individual picks that are better late game, Kali's going to outperform Thor come late game. But it just feels like Radiance has so much more team fight presence that I think that if I'm Radiance, I'm fine going to late game. I'm fine grouping up as 5 and just taking fights that way. So I think they're going to be favored there just based on their AoE alone.
It's true. You always got to worry about Kali, even in the late game, but it's just a bunch of control. I think that's one of Agni's big strengths. Any mid lane mage, you can factor in some reliable long-range CC. I just think it increases their value so much, man, and Agni's one of those gods that can benefit from it, and they've got a ton of great control and ways to fight into this space station composition, but they just have that lingering fear in the back of their minds. Are we going to be able to deal with Cherio on this Kali late? Maybe Adakning doesn't want to let him get there, though. Goes up with the ultimate, but Dardes takes the safer pathing. I wonder if he had any information on that, or if he just kind of takes the safer pathing as an instinct. But either way, he ends up avoiding possibly getting dunked.
No ward there. I'm pretty sure that's just good fundamentals from Dardes. I'm surprised that Adapting's willing to dunk on the wave, though. I feel like you don't want to give them the information that your ultimate is down. I think I would have preferred to see Kenneth drop down into the jungle. Cherio's not close, so you're pretty safe to just hammer into mid to get that farm and still get that same effect, but without giving that information away. Once Dardes walks in the lane that way, maybe he looks up and sees you, so there's a decent chance that he has that info either way, but it's a good reminder to just take the safe way into mid. So many players get picked that way, even in the Pro League, for just not taking the safe way into the mid lane, and Dardes saves his own life by doing it there.
Especially in that situation where, like you highlighted, you don't have much information. Obviously, if you've got the info there and you're good, go for it. But in that situation, especially with a Thor on the other side, and he's just now hitting 5, and it could happen at any time, take that safer pathing, man, and really force him to overcommit if they want something. But without that action there, I always feel like that's a big moment to sort of avoid. That first Thor ultimate, if you can, minimize that value, that's always big for the team up against him. As the blue buff invade is at least in the works, Cherio trying to strip this one away, and not much Benji can do, especially once Nika goes into the ultimate. So a successful attempt from SSG to take away blue.
I like the idea, though, from Benji. He puts good poke damage out on Nika. Nika doesn't really want to back quite yet. Understanding back timings in solo lane is really, really big. Just knowing when it's efficient to use your damage for poke and when you just want to be using it to clear the wave because they're going to back anyways. This sets up a gank really well for Adapting because his ultimate is up now. Nika's is down. That means that he's a free kill if he pushes up at all. But it seems like Adapting walked over a ward top right, and that gave Nika the info to back up. But Benji forcing out the ult and doing damage at the same time, even while he can't defend the blue, is just a little thing that he does to open up that solo lane for a gank, and that's how you see these junglers get more successful ganks in the pro league than you might expect in your typical game.
They're always thinking not just a couple steps ahead, but thinking other cooldowns ahead, right? There's this big difference between thinking about just what you might be able to do 4 minutes from now and what your whole squad might be able to do in that same time. So good work there from Radiance, at least try and set up, but even better work from SSG for having the information well worded on that right-hand side. And as a result, this game will start relatively slowly. And I know you already highlighted how that might be a boon for Radiance just because of their draft, but I think it might be a boon for them because of how they've been playing lately. Well, we might not have much time to talk about it. Cheerio. Once more aggression moves in, and there's the Dark Pillars. First blood for Cyclone Spin, though. It's Cheerio that ends up falling early. Now the snipes come out. It does bring the Ganesh back down to kill the threshold, but the wall stun won't come through, so Aurora uses it to get aggressive, finds the root, and it's another kill for Adapting. 2 on the board in a row for Radiance.
And that's just great pathing in from Adapting, and look at this! Nearly finds Vote Airstrike just in time to get him out of danger. But that first Thor ult doesn't find any purchase in mid, goes right, doesn't find anything there. Let's try the left-hand side. It just so happens that's exactly when SSG was trying to lay a trap of their own on that side of the map, and Adapting really turns those numbers very, very effectively. And that gank is just going to be hard to execute even without Adapting coming through because of Aurora's ultimate and how much time Cyclone Spin can buy. But with the way that it goes down with Adapting on the way, that's an easy teamfight win for Radiance.
And they look so much better when this is how they're able to start their games off, when Cyclone Spin's not having to try and fight back from a deficit or in the long lane, or when Aurora can be free to rotate around and be this unkillable bully. When those two sort of tightrope walkers, especially Aurora, are in a tougher spot, I feel like that's when we really see Radiance start to droop down. Because how consistent have Tings and Benji been? They've been great this season, I feel like. So really, when that left side doesn't get bullied out, that's when Radiance look like that scary team.
Agreed. I think that's usually the difference maker for them is just having this strong laning phase. You heard Benji say it during the interview that we just got to worry about getting out of laning phase and into a healthy spot come mid to late game, because their mid to late game team fights have been really, really solid as a team. I don't think they've lost a whole lot of late game fights in games because of it. It's really just been that they don't get that opportunity to come in on an equal footing into the mid to late game. So so far so good. 8.5 minutes in, they're still in a good spot, and Spacestation's drafted to go late anyways, so I don't feel like Spacestation should be necessarily worried. But if the laning phase is the concern for Radiance, then they're doing okay so far.
Good spot. Benji picks up the Shogun's Kusari for that second item for some magic defense. And against the Yorm, obviously magic defense, not that odd. But the Shogun's is kind of a bit of a different pickup. I feel like we don't see that as often much anymore.
This tells me that Benji's going to be going for some different CDR items later on in the build, because, I mean, this does have CDR already, but Genji's Guard is usually something that a lot of solo laners like to get because it just gives you your buttons back really, really quickly. That flat cooldown reduction, just seconds off your ability cooldowns versus percent CDR. Genji's has both. Shogun's only has one. But Shogun's also has that crowd control reduction, which is huge up against someone like that Hera that has that polymorph. You want to make sure that you're getting to max crowd control reduction pretty quickly. The attack speed really helps Ama because she's so focused on getting that passive stacked up. I like it.
Rapper might not like his spot, though. The hammer doesn't connecting, and it's big man Tings that gets the kill in the end. So Raffer's drop, but they're still stuck in this alcove, and SSG are on their way. It's a blanket from Cheerio, forces Tings to beads, and Adapting. That's huge that Cheerio got both sets, and they're still not done fighting. Cyclone Spin and Aurora drop down. Argus still in the chase, but everyone else is done at this point. SSG may have lost Raffer, but they do at least get some relics.
But look at this, Dardes doesn't want to give it up quite yet. Realizes he might not have the best option here to try and rotate in, but not going to give it up.
No, he's not. He's still over on this left-hand side, but he's got to be careful. Adapting is on his way over to this one as well. So yeah, Dardes elects not to go for the level 11 Hera gank without Argus, which I think probably is the right call here in this spot. But and we just got through mentioning, I mean, in this world where maybe they're trying to capitalize when would it be a little bit scarier for Adapting or Tings to try and rotate in without beads? Maybe there was something.
Could be. I mean, Hera still does pretty good damage at this point. Royal Assault does quite a bit if you're able to land that, and Polymorph should be pretty close to getting maxed right afterwards. So it's not like you're completely useless without Argus at this point in the game, but you certainly want to get Argus up when you can. That you get transformed from a suboptimal, okay character to holy cow, that Hera just one-shot me type of character pretty quickly. Little thing that I always see Dardes doing that is really, really smart for players that want to start playing Hera. He always makes sure his Argus dies as fast as possible after using it. And that's because this ability doesn't go on cooldown until after Argus is already gone. So Dardes constantly throws it into tower, makes it do some tower damage and die to tower. There he did it on Gold Fury. Just make sure that it doesn't follow you around, hitting nothing, doing nothing for you. You just want that cooldown up as soon as possible. And you get that flat cooldown reduction by hitting enemies with your Royal Assault and with your Polymorph. I mean, that is going to get Argus back even more quickly. He's got plenty of CDR. But just making sure that that cooldown starts ticking down right away is an important part of being as effective as you can be, as often as you can be.
To talk about some of these hunters here as well, I'm a bit surprised at how quickly Rom has sort of come back in with this change, right? I mean, Rom is one of those gods I think was always kind of teetering on the edge anyway. His late game is so good as a hunter, and his steroid so potent. Are you surprised at all that as soon as he got this sort of positive shift, he just was right back in it?
No, not really, because like you said, his late game has always been really good. He's always been viable if you can get him out of laning phase, and his early game has been so much better with this change.
Adapting doesn't get the dunk, but it does put him on the back side of Vote. Doesn't matter much, though. Vote uses that ultimate right away, and he's out of there. Rom can't do a whole lot in that spot if the setup's not there.
No, that's not going to be real kill potential. That kind of just opens up a more vulnerable Vote for this Gold Fury fight, but losing Anvil of Dawn also hurts Radiance's threat around this Gold Fury, so it's kind of a pretty even trade. Adapting's likely willing to make it because he's got so much CDR out of that Jotun's Wrath, so he's got 20%, whereas Vote doesn't have any. But Airstrike, believe, is just a lower base cooldown than that Anvil of Dawn anyways, so not going to end up being too much of a different factor. You're really hoping, I think Adapting was playing as if Vote was going to use that agility back towards his tower, and then he lands right on top of it with that agility down and kills him that way or gets relics. And then if you get relics, then you've got a real threat level on that Gold Fury, whereas as it stands, we're kind of chilling. We're doing the same thing.
So really no harm, no foul, it feels like, coming from that. Benji getting aggressive near the blue buff is going to suddenly find that there's a lot of company over here, but Dardes has left. They've defended the blue, and they don't want much more from the skirmish. Meanwhile, Radiance, now they've got the info that there were 3 over there. Step near gold. At least get the Oracle Vision. They know what's going to be going on in that pit, but they weren't ready to pull it yet. Dardes rotated off quickly. Maybe they didn't feel that confident in their small numbers advantage.
I mean, Radiance has really played this the way I expect, which is don't be aggressive, don't be the aggressor in the laning phase, wait for our time to shine a little bit later on in the game, and let's use our AoE to great advantage. If I'm Radiance, I'm checking builds, and I'm trying to play aggressively right now, or at least I was before Dardes just finished off that Divine Ruin. That Divine Ruin is so important against a Hera and against that Amaterasu that I think I would have loved to see Radiance try and pull this Gold Fury a little bit earlier.
They aren't going to pull it now, though. Half HP on the Fury and 2 bombs already used. Rapper drops the Dharmic Pillars, but the Gold Fury was still leashed. Now that Rapper's suddenly locked down inside the pit, he's taking a bunch of extra damage. Cyclone Spin hits every snipe, but it's still not enough damage. Rapper lives through it all, and now Radiance are the ones on the retreat path. You don't want to be low HP near Akali because she loves to chew him up, but they don't want the fight at all. Spacestation come right back towards the Gold Fury. Aurora's on the way, but cannot steal. It's SSG that get the Fury.
Just a weird decision there by Radiance. If you're pulling because you think you've got numbers advantage, the last thing you can afford to do is all in the support to try and kill him, because that's going to take the most amount of your time. Radiance drop gold, understandable with people coming in, but then why are we double triple ulting onto Raffer in that fight when he's still got shell up? He's going to be pretty tanky. I think Raffer just gets too many cooldowns for what he was doing there, and Radiance immediately can't stand and fight any longer, and that leaves a very big vacuum in which it's pretty easy for Spacestation to fill the void and go in and get that goal.
Just a bit of disconnect on how they wanted that Gold Fury fight. I agree. I mean, they still hold on to a very small lead, but that was, I feel like, a really good opportunity for Radiance to kind of push out a little bit further and try and give themselves an advantage. About 1,000 gold, 2,500 experience, not bad, but even still, certainly not huge or game-breaking. And look it's almost all on Tings over Dardes. Hadn't realized what an advantage he'd built up there in them. So that's certainly something, but feels as though Radiance could have easily had more.
I mean, Tings has spent a little bit more time at home in mid lane. Dardes has been rotating quite a bit, you know, trying to find ganks in duo a little bit earlier on. And the big thing is that Tings is ahead without putting adapting super far behind at this point. That's really, I mean, anyone can get ahead if you just take all the farm from your team. That, you know, there's limited farm on the map. You can only get it from somewhere. It's really impressive whenever you're able to get leads without setting your team behind, and Tings is doing a good job of that here.
Benji gets the Magai's cloak off from Raffer. He finished the Gauntlet of Thebes. We saw him waiting on where he was going to go next, and it was the Magai's. And this is a matchup where I feel like it could be tough maybe to get full Magai's value for Raffer here. Do you like this pickup?
I agree with what you're saying. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think that there's a lot of low commit CC from a distance for Radiance to pop this Magi's bubble.
Well, they were considering all-inning Dardes. I think that's every bomb from Tings, and Dardes walks away, but the dazzling offensive cuts the gap. Benji's able to get the kill credit. In comes adapting to drop down the walls. That brings the Kali low, but still not enough for any more kills. But Cyclone Spin has the air quotes execute. If he needs to ult and finish off some low targets, they got the cleanup. Instead, they'll take the tier 1 tower. Radiant find themselves a pick and a small objective.
Really nice initiation by Tings, just walking up, and you'll see good Agni players lead with the 2 before the ult, because it's a lot faster to get that stun off, and that's exactly what catches Dardes. It seems like this draft from Radiance, not only is it great at team fighting, I think it's pretty good at punishing this Terra. I think this is the exact mid lane pick that they were expecting to go up against. Agni, very easy for him to stun the pretty immobile mid-mage. Then the follow-up root from Aurora, that's going to cause Hera problems every day of the week. And if Dardes doesn't get a lead, it isn't able to do this crazy flank play that he likes to do a lot with his character, is he going to be too vulnerable on the front side to a pretty good CC setup between Agni and Terra and Amma and Thor that's going to be coming at him? I think Radiance looked pretty well prepped for what Spacestation was going to pick in mid.
It's almost like blanket CC, right? From the Amma, from the big Terra route as well. Hard to miss an Agni stun, and Thor gets so many chances at him. I'm right there with you, man. That control can really be a nightmare for some of these immobile mid lane mages, as you mentioned earlier, reliant mostly on movement speed and Argus to try and get them out of tough spots. So Radiance maybe slightly make up for that Gold Fury error early on by forcing down the tier 1 tower, finding a pick, and getting Pyromancer. Obviously, since it's cumulative, you're way better off with both. But in a world where, you know, you make that mistake, you're able to regroup though, and then get back and find a punish. Seems like Radiant still have their heads in the right spot.
I mean, they're in a really good spot now. Only up about 2K, but you can feel the momentum's in their favor. They've got 2 pretty big experience leads in mid and in solo. Benji level 20 already, Nika is not. And so now Benji should really just be grouping up with the squad. You don't need to farm a whole lot more. Those attack speed boots and Shoguns have now combined with this Toxic Blade to give him some more damage, still some decent survivability, but a lot of attack speed now on this character. It'll be pretty easy for Radiance to do objectives as long as Benji's around.
It's not so uncommon, the attack speed focus. We see Amateras's with the Berserker shield all the time, but I think up against this magical Jormungandr, Benji was forced to kind of get there a different way and was able to get there nicely. It has about a 2-level lead or so over Nika, and he's comfortable. That aura from him as part of these team fights, it's going to be real tough for Spacestation to deal with here for these next couple of skirmishes. And Radiance are positioned like they want to make one happen with Primal. They just sent teams back to base. Adapting will, of course, be grabbing speed first, then grouping. And with relics available for everyone, it should be a relatively close fight.
Upgraded Shell for both supports, but not a Frenzy there for Aurora. He's gone with the Blink. Blink Terra ult, always a good way to get a team fight started. But no Frenzy means that they're really relying on Benji as the main objective turner. Looks like they might not even need him. Gold Fury already down to 1 HP, but Raffer walks in, says, thank you very much, fellas, for getting that started for me. I'll be taking that. Thank you very much. Dharmic Pillar's an easy steal for SSG.
They just used the last tick of it to strip that one away. The Agni Bombs were not for confirmation. They were more for burn on that objective, and there was no zone to speak of. So the Fury does indeed end up going down in favor of Space Station. That's twice now where Radiant should have probably feel like they had pretty easy claim to a Fury and just couldn't get it.
Yeah, that's big too, because, I mean, 4-0 in kills. Radiance has this big experience lead. Experience leads are pretty close to not mattering anymore. Nika's closing the gap because Benji can't pull any further ahead. I like this idea from Radiance. Frustrating to lose that Fury, but let's not lose our aggressiveness. Let's stay grouped because they're just stronger right now in this 5-on-5. Their team fight is better because of the characters, and they've got the levels to use them.
All 5 members here for a Tier 2 tower siege the honest way. Perhaps. I'm sure Radiance would much prefer to find some picks, but they give up the idea of trying to force down this Tier 2 tower in right and instead disengage. So difficult. I feel like we so rarely see full-on fights underneath the tower without one team having at least a big lead or a Fire Giant buff, and Radiance elect not to take it this time, even though, as you mentioned, they would be probably favored considering the current game state.
But Tier 2 tower is pretty far away from anything safe for you, and Space Station is really at a point where, yes, they're not favored, but it's certainly not impossible for them to win a fight from this position. So Radiance just kind of tests the waters, dips a toe in. The Space Station is going to be here in force in order to defend and just kind of take their small win on the Tier 1 where they can get it, which is a wise call by them. This composition isn't getting weaker for Radiance. Space Stations is arguably getting a little bit stronger as Cherio gets deeper into the build, but I don't think Radiance have a whole lot of need to force it right now.
And they elect to take a somewhat slower line there. I mean, it almost doesn't even feel right to call it a slower line, right? Because Radiant should be further ahead. I mean, now twice they've had pretty dominant control over a half HP or lower Fury, and it's been taken away from them. They're going to try again with the Pyromancer. It's only Nika nearby, and they get the range CC they need. So Nika starts to fall low, forced into using that ultimate early, but the Pyromancer is still standing. Radiant's able to take care of it this time. Nika with the disengage on those final 2 shots of the ultimate, but Radiant's not thinking about disengaging. Able to find the stun off the ultimate is Benji. Thor goes up to the sky as well as the snipes come in from Cyclone, knowing there'd be a stun, but even still, SSG survived. No one has fallen yet.
Big ult from Dardes, though, right onto the back line. Argus goes, but not everybody from Radiance was low, and by that I mean no one from Radiance was really low enough for that play to pay off. Raffer and Nika just got too far forward, and you see this great control from Radiance's draft. It's Agni Bomb into Terror Root, into Thor Wall, into Thor Dunk, into another Agni Bomb because he's got plenty of CDR. He's capped in the CDR department, so he's got plenty of Noxious Fumes to go around, and it's just so much for these frontliners to be able to handle. I like the Spirit Robe pickup now for Raffer, knowing that he just needs any degree of safety that he can get from this CC.
Good polymorph there from Dardes, prevents the engage from Radiance. They were looking to see if they could lock down Nika without the ultimate. Meanwhile, the information comes in that Cheerio is alone in the backline, so Radiance turn heads, but Cheerio far enough away that he should be okay at this point, though adapting is lurking. So the rest of Radiance start up this FG. It's starting to be burned very slowly. Maybe not a full-on commit here at this point, but they are indeed bringing it down, daring Space Station to force their way in. No beads for Vote in the back as the Fire Giant gets taken to SSG. 3 objectives that Radiant have failed to confirm. It's going to be backbreaking for them if they can't win the fight, and Vote's here to make sure they can't. Gets Stings to start things off. Cyclone Spin responds with a kill onto Cheerio, but this is SSG's time to shine. Silence on Aurora, consuming Bellow there as well, but he makes his way out of there. Radiance on the full-on disengage.
Nice persistent gust over the wall from Vote, and airstrike to finish it off. I don't know, Finch. I mean, it just feels stubborn from Radiance, doesn't it? I mean, they lose one objective fight. Sure, you know, we made a miscall. We didn't know what we were doing when Raffer showed up. We overcommitted to him. We won't do it the next time. The next time, they paid Raffer no attention whatsoever, and he waltzes in and steals it. And now they go, yeah, let's just 50-50 another one. What's the worst thing that could happen? we could lose our entire lead and have the Fire Giant stolen out right from under us and really feed Space Station a great victory back into this game.
And we should have a little bit of time to go back and look at that steal so we can see exactly how it happens. Radiance were in a pretty good spot, I would argue, to be able to consume this. But again, the Omni Bombs are a bit more for burn than for confirm, and the Dharmic Pillars able to take that one out from underneath them yet again. Radiance really have played better in just about every category except for the ones that matter here, Aggro. You've got to be able to secure these objectives or it's going to be hard to win.
Yeah, I mean, Agni does a lot of things well. Securing objectives really isn't one of them. They even use Thor Dunk to try and make sure that they secure that, but just a little bit too late, I think, on it, or just, I mean, if you're using Thor Dunk to secure, you're coin flipping, right? I mean, you're not really going for anything super secure. Nothing on Radiance's composition is super secure. It's doing these objectives, so you're just coin flipping by nature. Feel like the lack of frenzy may be hurting Radiance. I mean, if they're doing that objective a lot faster, maybe Space Station can never get in close enough to maybe seal it away, but I think you just got to tip your cap to Raffer and that old support mentality of just timing on stealing these objectives, and just throw your hands up and say, we know we're doing our best, but our composition doesn't really secure objectives. You just got to win the fight first.
And Space Station have done a great job of not allowing them. I mean, remember right before that fight, Nico was a bit out of position, but Dardez was there with the polymorph, bought him just a little bit of space. He was able to get back out of there. Whenever it looks like Radiance do have a chance to get that poke off or to get a pick, Space Station have done a good job defending.
Now Space Station are on the offensive for the first time, though. How well are they going to be able to use that lead?
Now, Dharmic Pillars is going to trap in both Aurora and Benji. Silence keeps them stuck there too, but SSG not going to hard commit to grabbing that tier 2 tower. Another minute left on this Fire Giant buff, and they've earned themselves about a 5,000 gold lead in this time. But it looks like in terms of actually bringing down these Phoenixes, Space Station not going to make a lot of headway. So I think coming into this next FG fight here, Aggro, I mean, I know the Radiants are going to be down coming into it, but it's still relatively even for a late game Fire Giant fight.
Yeah, I mean, 6,000 gold at 28 minutes is noteworthy. That'll be a couple items finished on the other side that you don't have. I mean, Dardez is 5 items deep, whereas Tings is still waiting to finish off a Charon's coin or a Rod of Tahuti, whichever way he's going with the build. If there's a silver lining here for Radiance is that they haven't lost a team fight yet. The one that they lose around Fire Giant, you know, they get 2 kills that, you know, Space Station still barely managed to scrape together by the end of it. Before that, Radiance has really just dominated every single fight. So it's really been Space Station pulling back at the right times, showing a great willingness to bend but not break, and give up enough space to make Radiance feel like they can start objectives, and then coming in and really punishing them for doing so on the back end.
Hey, this might be a bit of a favor. I mean, Radiance have had 3 times trying to score on offense. Maybe they can score on defense here instead, as the Pyromancer will be going down for Space Station, and SSG should be the one starting up the Fire Giant here this next time. And their tools, I mean, I was being glib there, but they do have tools that feel a little bit better for contest than for confirm, right? I mean, on this side, I mean, maybe it will be a tough job here for Space Station to secure this.
And even still, Space Station just gives up the whole map pressure right away,
That's true.
knowing that they have some resets coming. Look at this sovereignty pickup for Dardez. No Sov there for Raffer. It's pretty common to see something like a Mantle of Discord or a Spirit Robe last item on mages to give them some defense. If you don't have a sovereignty already, I kind of like it. I mean, it's a ton of protection, a ton of health. It's really cheap, and it gives it to Vote or Cherio, whoever Dardez is near at the same time. It's not any magical protection, so it doesn't hurt Tings or Aurora, but I kind of like it.
Cheerio moves in first, finds a 2-man stun, but he is low. Had to use the beads in order to disengage. Benji hits a nice 2-man stun, and Cheerio has to ult. I think that was the pressure from Cyclone Spin's ultimate that forces Cheerio into the destruction. Either way, Radiance are able to push back Space Station. They got the beads out from Cheerio and the ult from him, but that's about it.
But now we see this new ROM change, how much it's going to help Cyclone get this ultimate back, because using it at the outset of that fight, strong, you know, make sure that Cheerio uses his ultimate. That's a very valuable cooldown. But now with this change, you get some flat reduction. off of your ultimate cooldown every time you pick up an Astral Arrow. That's going to be key here for Cyclone.
Stepping forward is Benji Aurora, but they get two-man knocked up by Nika. Not a bad way to start the fight. Aurora tries to get to the back line, but he catches crits from Vote and doesn't have an answer. Adapting does get rid of Cheerio with no ultimate, but it costs Benji his life. A 2-for-1 so far favoring SSG, and Nika wants to keep things going. Finds his way to Tings for a double kill. They completely push Radiance out of the Fire Giant pit. Now they come back to FG and should be able to grab it, though Adapting still nearby. Looks like he's going to spend more time pushing.
Okay, they won a team fight. That was necessary for you to ultimately win the game, unless you're E-United when they've got Horus. But this time around, Spacestation actually does win a team fight, and they are going to be able to get this enhanced Fire Giant because of it. Cherry does his job, man. He still does a lot of damage to Benji. Benji frontlines pretty effectively for Radiance in that moment. Thorns right there. He puts out plenty of damage on a Cheerio. Actually, Mantle stuns him directly into Adapting's ultimate, which makes it for a pretty easy kill. But Aurora was taking too much damage on the right side of that fight, and then Nika just uses that phenomenal range on the World Serpent to make sure that there's no escape route for Big Man or for Cyclone on the back end, eventually picking up Big Man. Really nice fight by Spacestation, just keeping Radiance nice and spread out, using the defensive tools they have, and they don't want to let Radiance catch them all grouped up. It's important for Spacestation to stay spread out in these team fights because of the great AoE presence from Radiance's composition. You got to get bigger than those big circles you're going to be going up against, and Spacestation did that well that fight.
Radiance now, despite still holding on to the kill lead, are on the back foot. We're going to get to see Spacestation's attempt at a siege, and we also blew up my theory of maybe the defense going better than the offense here for Radiance. So far, neither one has particularly worked. Spacestation will take a 7k gold lead into this next fight. Relic should be up for everyone on their side. Meanwhile, Radiance, still about 40 seconds left for Beads, for Adapting and Tings. But with Spacestation still not in position to threaten just yet, it shouldn't matter too much. Radiance should be ready to go for this Phoenix defense.
And their Phoenix defense is pretty solid. I mean, Agni is certainly not a bad character on the defense. You have to be pretty patient with your bombs, but as long as you are, you can put out good damage and hold CC until the very last second. I think that he's a pretty tough character to siege against. Thor walls can cause problems. It's gonna be tough, I think, for Spacestation to freely break this defense. Where Dardes is able to find that Argus drop is gonna be huge on these fights, because if Big Man has stepped up a little bit too far on hugging that wall, like right where he is right now, and Dardes finds him, it's gonna be a pretty easy siege to break.
Tings does go to that exact positioning, looking to clear waves. Doesn't have to use too many of those bombs for that, I imagine, but a lot of the duties will be falling down to Big Man Tings. It'll be a 3-2 split, the Kali and the Hera in mid, and Benji gets polymorphed right out the gate, so the wave makes its way in, but Adapting responds with a hammer that does half of Dardes' health, but Cheerio doesn't need much time to bring Benji low. Meanwhile, on the left, the Dharmic Pillars have already been used. Vote acting more like a chainsaw than a hunter at this point, chewing through anyone in front of him, but still, Radiance's base is holding. They've lost some Phoenix health, though.
And Dharmic Pillars already on cooldown. That Phoenix still healthy enough. That is a good start for Radiance.
And Aurora still had his ultimate at this point, so it's a great time for Radiance to step forward. Big shots from Cyclone Spin brings Vote down low, and Benji not going to quite find a stun on a Cheerio. Now he's got to reposition as Nika continues to keep everybody displaced. That was with an Earthen Fury with this ultimate here from Terra, and still Radiance are on the back foot. Cheerio catches up to Aurora, gets the kill, leaps in for Benji to make it a double. The Kali is online, but Cyclone Spin shuts it down. Not going to be the full reset as left side Phoenix is low, and SSG grab.
Man, Radiance should count their lucky stars that Cheerio forgot to do the most important thing on Kali, which is press forward. Never got that ultimate off. That might have been game if he had.
Nika could be in some trouble here too. Manages to wiggle out of that Thor wall, connecting him, but Cyclone Spin not gonna miss, not a large of a target. So even though Spacestation get that left side Phoenix, they lose 3 members for the pleasure and end up having to completely fall back. Obviously still a big advantage for them to have the Phoenix furthest from the FG, but Radiance are making this siege really difficult.
I mean, Aurora found a really good ultimate, but Spacestation's disengage and then re-engage was quite solid. I think they did a good job of understanding how much space they needed to create, how much room they needed for Radiance to pull out of their base, and then the turnaround pretty simple for me. I mean, if Cherio just gets that ult off, he probably kills Cyclone. I mean, Cyclone had no relics. If he kills Cyclone, that game's over, more or less, because you're going to have Cherio nice and healthy. Imagine that was the target, and then that's pretty hard to come back from. But with Cherio getting crit on that last auto, didn't give enough respect to how much damage he was going to take. I think between the Phoenix and the autos coming from Cyclone, he got a little bit caught off guard and died before it went off.
A good fight still for Space Station, as Radiance will now have to start thinking about how much they want to defend this Fire Giant. They're still going to have minions to worry about in the left. They're up near topside purple, and will continue to push now that they're Fire minions, making life harder for Radiance. That's what makes it so valuable on that left-hand side. If they want to show presence at Fire Giant, they could be losing Titan health or their Phoenix when it respawns, as SSG are already here, and it looks like Radiance are going to be here for the defense.
Surprised. They've had trouble around objectives so far this game. I'm surprised that they're willing to show up and really throw their hat in the ring on this one, especially with how little they pushed up that fire wave on the left-hand side. If you push this up to Gold Fury area, it's not so bad, but this is pretty risky, man. I mean, that fire wave's going to hit the Titan right away.
And no one appears to be backing. Radiance are in on this defense here, aggro. I had that, but Benji was indeed backing, so they'll send at least one person there. He has the upgraded teleport. He can rejoin them onto a ward, no problem. So he can deal with a wave, but this is exactly where Space Station feel favored, where they want to force Benji back and still have Fire minions or Radiance to worry about in the back of their mind. Argus finds adapting. He does make it up to the sky, but just barely. It's got to be purely defensive. Meanwhile, Vote's in some trouble. Benji got back there, and Cyclone Spin hits the third shot. That's enough for Vote to end up falling. So now Radiance finally have the 5v4 advantage, but can you call it 5v4? When someone has to defend the left side wave, it's really 3-on-4, and SSG realize that they still have the advantage. They re-engage.
Benji gets absolutely chunked by Cherio. Late game has arrived for the Kali, and Cherio finds his third kill, but Adapting and Cyclone are on their way back.
And they can re-tip these scales back in Radiance's, for that wall is great against just about everybody else except Ganesh, I'm pretty sure, but unfortunately, he cares not for your walls. Fire minions continue to punish the Titan of the Chaos side team. They get their stun on the Rapper, but he's got the silence. That prevents any more follow-up from coming. Radiance are all in committing to try and get this, but the Titan is slowly dying. It will lose to this minion wave if Radiance can't get back there, and Space Station are not going to let them channel their back at this point. They're going to have to hoof it the hard way. As SSG keep up the presence, Adapting takes to the sky with his own ultimate, does find the dunk down the Rapper, but look how low their Titan is. They might be winning a fight, but losing the game here at this point, as Adapting gets the double kill. Cyclone Spin's unstoppable, and the Titan barely survives. Is that a calculation? Do you give them credit for that?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta give them some credit, right? They know that they aren't gonna die to that exact wave. I don't know that sending a roar back is the right call here, though, because he just can't defend this Phoenix. Benji's on the way up, and then minion wave spawns, but it's too late. I just don't understand the decision to send a roar back of everybody. I mean, send Big Man back. He's not going to do that much objective DPS. Send Adapting back. He's not going to do that much objective DPS. Maybe they're worried about Vote showing up, and so they need as much damage as possible to do it quickly, but just think that was the wrong call to send a roar back as opposed to literally anybody else that was alive.
A tough series of decisions that Radiance had to make there. How do they defend? But eventually they made the call. Adapting went up with the ultimate, and they all in committed to that fight and right. They were able to win it. Their Titan survived with 2,000 HP, I believe it was, at the bare end there, and they're able to grab the mid-Phoenix, plus they still have Fire Giant on everyone with plenty of time on it to spare. So this game continues to seesaw back and forth. This Space Station just barely comes short.
But now it's just such a large period of time where your Titan isn't going to heal, and you just cannot afford to siege Phoenixes with everybody up on Space Station unless you know where they all are, because just about any character could walk in and kill your Titan. Vote kills your Titan, Dardes kills your Titan, Cherio kills your Titan. Nika probably doesn't, and neither does Raffer, although honestly Raffer maybe does with Dharmic Pillars. You have to keep track of every single person on the map, and here goes Cherio. He's going to try and find an angle that the enemy team doesn't have wards potentially, and maybe just try and waltz up for the end.
Yeah, it's not even just on keeping tabs, but you kind of also have to stay into the position where you can react at any point. And I don't think they're ready for Cherio's pathing. The good news is they are backing
no wards.
big man teams. Oh no, he's not backing. Raffer steps up and prevents it. I think Cherio is going to get this. They don't have any idea that he's taking this pathing towards making it. Once he goes through the Phoenix, they'll see. And Big Man Tings is backing now just in case. But I don't know if he can do enough. Cherio has the option available, which means he cannot be killed in this state as long as he can survive. But he can't. They get the kill. That's enough to stop Cherio from ending the game. Adapting takes down Boat as well. Maybe Radiance can turn this around after all.
Now this is a great spot for them to be in. Maybe not for Aurora individually, because Dardes claps him with the Royal Assault, and now it's Benji who goes, guys, we were winning this fight, right? But Adapting says, Cherry, let me show you how it's done, big fella. I'm gonna go and end the game myself.
I don't think he can, though, by himself. So, yeah, he starts to back up there. Good recognition that he didn't quite have that much threat. But at the very least, it pulls Nika back. So now in the more honest 2-on-2, Radiance win that. Dardes ends up falling on that side of the map. What a game. This has been back and forth in this late game as they continue to push and pull each other across the map.
Rafford is doing his best to distract in the mid lane, but Benji's going to go back. This left side Phoenix is going to come up. Adapting actually has gotten caught. He's dead to Nika's damage. Rafford baits his former teammate perfectly, but now Benji's back. It never ends, Finch. It never ends.
No, it is a carousel of kills as Benji is forced to use the ultimate to secure that kill onto Rafford, and that will stagger his death. We don't talk about a lot in Smite, but certainly relevant that he'll be 30 seconds behind everyone else on Space Station, giving Radiance a bit of time to work with, but Adapting perhaps equally staggered behind Aurora. Either way, though, a bit of stubbornness, I feel like, from Kenneth there in that fight in mid. It definitely didn't have to die there.
No, but man, killing Rafford just feels so good. I mean, you got to try, right, in that situation. But that's exactly the way the Rafford wants you to play, is trying to kill him and baiting you into bad spots. As it stands, though, Radiance come out way ahead from all of that craziness because their Titan stays alive, their Phoenix is about to be up, and their Titan's about to start healing.
I love the idea of sending Cherio on that mission as well. He's the one with that destruction ultimate. Even if they sort of get caught out as they did, he probably had the best chance of finishing that off, even with opposition there. But still, Big Man Tings plays it pretty much perfectly. And as soon as that ultimate went down, Cherio died instantaneously. So they defend all three Phoenixes now. The Titan will start to regen HP. That left side Phoenix will never be back to normal, but it will certainly still be strong for them on that side. As they start to push out this wave, it's now Space Station have to worry. Let their own mid-Phoenix come back up and start to defend against these fire waves.
I wonder if anyone could have gone with Cherio, because if he even has one more person there, I think they end. It's just the fact that you're not able to put that much individual DPS out as Kali. I mean, you've got chin size that don't affect the Titan. Your Odysseus bow isn't doing you a whole lot of good in that instance, and Big Man spaced pretty well around it. Wonder if you can send Dardes alongside Cherio, because Cherio can tank the longest in theory because of that destruction ultimate, even besides a tank, because a Titan damage ramps up so fast. But maybe if Space Station had sent an extra member, they lose that fight outright so hard that it never ends up being enough, and they lose the base race either way. Tough call. That's just a really tough position.
And both teams have been in those tough spots, and both of them have made, I think, at the very least, defensible decisions, right? Just where maybe because we have the results, it didn't pan out, but certainly they've been close. This is a big Oni Fury, though, that Vote's finding on the left-hand side. Sanguine loved to do this in the late game, but this time it's Space Station. It might not matter, though. They're going to lose Rafford this early on in the fight, but Argus chunks onto Adapting. Not enough for the kill. He's up in the sky. His picture might be X'd out, but Adapting still roams the earth at this point. Will be able to get the back off in time and survive. So that is a pick now for Radiance, the 5v4 for this next fight.
Crazy damage from Dardes, and that's where you think, how much good is this sovereignty really doing me in that instance? Adapting lives because it's not 6 full damage items.
If it's even a speck of damage more, I think they get that kill, right? As Vote has to use his Aegis to immune out the stun, or rather the damage, coming from Benji. Cyclone Spin can't find much with the ult from there, so they turn back to the FG. They're going to try and punish Space Station for backing. Dardes is kind of close, but he doesn't even have Argus. This should be a free Fire Giant for Radiance to grab here at this point, and now, after the way the objective secure has gone this way, we've somehow evened up the total number of Fire Giants between these two teams.
This has been one of the most back and forth games. Finch, you and I have just been, for a while it was Dave and I were cursed that no team that started an objective would ever finish it, though maybe that's just my curse because Dave's not here and that's still happening in a lot of games that I'm casting. But you and I have just had some real brawls as of late. We had a United Obey yesterday that was 45 minutes of smackdown on both sides, and kind of the same here between Radiance and Space Station.
Well, we knew that both of these teams had drafted compositions that would prefer to fight late, right? And we don't see that too often. We usually see the opposite happening. One is late, one is more early, and how that ends up panning out. So these teams both feel very comfortable right now, but this is a trap from SSG, and I don't think Radiance are ready for it. Argus chunks onto two, but Vote's been left in the back. Aurora gets the kill credit for that one. Tings, though, dies in trade, but Adapting finds the stun. Rapper's low, but not dead. Cheerio low, but not dead. How long can Space Station last? Not much longer. Able to get the kill on the Cheerio. Dardes falls as well. Now Nika in trouble as Cyclone Spin gobbles up the double, and that's the conclusion we were looking for. Radiance put a stamp on game one.
I mean, I'm sure it scared Radiance right there. That's a surprise that you're not really ready for, but really good turnaround from them. Just solid job by Cyclone Spin. Come out of that fight with both relics and full HP. That positioning has got to be really, really good. 9-1-9 for him. A really impressive ROM game in game one.
It's huge from Cyclone Spin, man. And we talked about how coming into this game that Cyclone Spin has struggled. I don't think there's any other ways to talk about it, but these have not been my man's best weeks. An illustrious career, Cyclone Spin is unquestioned in my mind, but there's not been his time. So I think a big game like this, where he's able to perform this well, I think that's huge for Radiance.
Agreed. If he can come back to that hard hyper carry late game dude who you just can't give him any god, it feels like. He'll pick Jibalanke or Rom, or he'll go Uller and just dominate you early. It just gives a whole different flavor to this Radiance team, a whole different dimension that's pretty difficult to beat.
Well, perhaps this ROM pick can be the beginning of that here for Cyclone Spin. A nice game one, but that is only game one, as I get you back over to Gore to break it down.
A game one filled with Galaxy Brain plays, or, well, something maybe resembling them. And hey, speaking of Galaxy, you can go Galactic right now with the Galaxy Hero chest in-game. Get the new Galaxy Maverick skin for Naja and rock it while you're in the jungle, doing your best Cheerio impression or Adapting impression, whichever one you want to go for. Whether you're in the 80% for Radiance, the 20% for SSG, you can go out there, conquer the battleground, and beyond with the Galaxy Hero chest. But, you know, Mifflin... I don't know where in the script Hindu decided that the last, 10 minutes of that game were just going to be vamping from either side to see what could happen, but you could definitely tell things started to fall apart. I mean, the entire game felt like a series of unfortunate events for Radiance, but, I mean, they were still able to hold on to at least something resembling a lead for a lot of it.
Yeah, Radiance for the first 15 minutes or so really held the driver's seat wholly. There was no point that SSG looked like they were coming back into it, and then one misplay around Gold Fury, SSG steal it. Another misplay around Fire Giant, SSG steal it and win the fight. And then from there, they used that power play to establish a lead for the majority of the game, not quite able to close it out. It was a long match. I have a lot of notes here. I'm going to have to kind of sparse through them real quick. A big gank attempt from the SSG boys ends in a loss. That's how it happens.
Yeah, I mean, so many times where maybe one team saying, hey, big blank attempt, whether you want to call it a gank, whether it's a Gold Fury, whether it's a Fire Giant, results in a loss. I mean, the quote that I actually pulled out from Aggro in the middle of it was just that it felt stubborn from Radiance in some of these moments, specifically around 25 minutes when SSG stole the Fire Giant away. But also, I mean, I don't know if we've seen two Titans get that low before and that close to getting backdoored. Once from Winions, once from Akali, once from Thor trying to get aggressive. I mean, it was just so neck and neck at the very end there.
It was. I mean, I really thought the game was going to end once SSG was able to stop the backs from Radiance and those Winions were back there. But unfortunately, the fight goes Radiance's way, or unfortunate for SSG, I should say. But we can't ignore Cyclone Spin's just ecstatic performance here. 10, 1, and 9. The kid is back. He literally tweeted out yesterday, I believe, I'm washed. I guess he decided that he isn't anymore because that performance was dominating. No one was able to shut him down.
Maybe it was like I'm washed as in, you know what, I'm clean now, I got rid of all the dirty play, I can come in and go 10, 1, and 9 once again. Because it definitely seems like a new, reinvigorated Cyclone Spin that appeared today. I mean, 6, 1, and 16 there, a huge amount of assists for the jungler there out of adapting. You can tell where the assistance was coming from. You could maybe tell where the focus was. 0 and 8 for Raffer, 4 and 7 for Cherio, and then 1 and 4 for Dardez. A lot of focus on maybe keeping that 3v3 core down there. But Cyclone Spin, an insanely good game. Adapting, a very solidly good game. And even though, we can look at the faux pas around some of the objectives, I think it says something about the state of Radiance that they were able to kind of maintain a majority control for the duration of the game.
And even when they were behind, there was huge leads for SSG, 8,000, 10,000 gold, and Radiance buckled down and they defend incredibly adeptly. It's not easy to shift your focus from being ahead for 20 minutes, then behind for 20 minutes, and then a complete arena match for the last 10 minutes. It's hard to constantly adapt to having to shift up your play style. I'm astounded that Radiance is able to come out of their slump in such a strong way, especially against SSG, who was playing incredibly well today as well.
Well, that game ends up being equal to about 2 of the games out of the night set that we just watched a little bit earlier on. So we'll have to see what they're able to do as we jump now forward to game number 2. See if one of these teams can maybe take a more solid grip of control on this one, and also how the bans potentially shift throughout this. Radiance first off getting first pick here, and even though maybe early on it wasn't the end-all be-all of the game, I think letting Adapting have that Thor, letting that ROM go through, it definitely showed a lot of strength for Radiance. SSG now have potentially, the potential I should say, to grab 1 or 2 of those if they let something else strong through for Radiance as well.
I'm not sure that SSG even really need to shift up their draft here. We saw that Nika and Dardez were top of the damage charts in that game despite losing. They were able to safely perform. The damage output was good. The dive potential was all there. It's just a couple misplays, a bit of a misplaced gank in that long lane to really throw away the match. They didn't have to do that. They could have played defensively and possibly drawn out the game another 10, 15 minutes. They don't really need to make these huge strides to change up what was going on there. Rom getting taken away, he's not even the most potent ADC in the game right now. Yes, Cyclone Spin made him look like that, but there's so many other strong picks that you have to be worried about. Uhl comes to mind. Chernobog comes to mind. Banning out Rom might leave you open to losing against something even better.
I'm still kind of lasting inside those, last few fights as it was, because it did feel a lot like, in the old silent movies of people slipping on marbles. Something's about to happen, but it goes on for a little bit until finally they do collapse. But we'll see if they can clean up the play this time around. King Arthur, Aphrodite, Khepri taken away on the side of Radiance. Uhl, as you had mentioned, the Emojin, the Camazotz on the other side, which does mean, notably, like Raijin, Merlin are going to be available here. And maybe he's not the end-all, be-all #1 hunter right now, but Cyclone Spin, like you said, not only makes him look like it, but also maybe feels that way about him. They first pick Rom here for Radiance, the counter being the Merlin and the Xing Shen. How are you feeling about this Rom going so high priority?
I think Rom is a guy that you can pick very early on in your draft. It's not going to show too much. You're not really drafting the rest of your team around this Rom. He's going to fit into just about any draft that you want. So take it first means you don't have to show your hand elsewhere, but it seems like the hand's been shown, and it was shown in Game 1, Thor getting picked up again. It makes sense to me, right? You take out the jungler. You already know that Adapting had a fantastic performance on it. Might as well take it again. And the Raijin getting picked up, that's just standard mid lane Raijin versus Merlin. The one shift that we see from Radiance in this early is that Khepri ban in the first 3. That's incredibly intelligent because you know that Raffer really wants to get back to his roots. He had a good couple of fights on that Ganesh, but he struggled a lot in the early game.
Well, speaking of back to the roots, Cherio's going back to Kali. And, well, last game it maybe had some moments, had some not moments there. The ult being just off. If he has just a second longer there, that game ends about 5 minutes earlier, and with SSG having a win in their column. So unfortunate for him, but he's going to run it back. The Amaterasu, the Osiris taken around. I didn't get to ask this, and I don't even know if it's the right vein of thought for me to be in, especially since Radiance also seemed to be thinking, let's ban out solo laners. But is this Xing Chen something that you could flex to the solo lane and maybe play around to put Raffer on something like a Geb? Or is it duo lane all the way?
Xing Chen can be played solo. We saw that a lot in the console league in seasons 4 and 5. He's a very safe god. He's not really going to get bullied out too much. The HP 5 in his kit is going to give him an additional survivability. His mana output is very low, so even if the blue buff does get invaded, it should be generally all right for him. But I really do think it should go into that support role. Get involved a little bit earlier on. Leverage that aggressive playstyle, hook slam, comes to mind as one of the most potent early game CCs as a knockup into a root. He's going to be able to mitigate some of that auto attack damage from this Rom, who is completely dependent on that for his lane clear. It should be a decent counter matchup if we see it go towards support.
Well, Radiance aren't even going to give the option to Spacestation to try and flex it over and pick up a Geb. They're just going to go ahead and steal that Geb away themselves. A lot of shielding. It's going to make it maybe a little more difficult for that Kali to get that target, for that Hu Yi to lock someone down, and for Xing Chen to Xing Chen people with his CC. So a lot of good counter, I think, that comes out of that. Plus the Jormungandr here going up potentially against the Nike. How is it? I mean, Nike, we haven't gotten to see in the solo lane for a while. How does she feel over there?
She's okay. She deals damage. She gets the tankiness online. She's not really the type of bully warrior that you're expecting. She's not King Arthur. She's not Osiris. She's not anything like that. She's going to be able to lock down the lane, likely play safely, one of the safer gods you can have over there. I mean, can't beat the safety of having essentially 2 health bars. I'm worried about SSG's draft here. How are they going to be able to engage these fights safely? It's almost going to be completely contingent on Xing Chen for the first 20 or so minutes until this Nike can rotate out. Whereas Radiance has Thor engage, they have Geb engage. If Yorm decides to rotate, they have that as well. Should be an interesting match.
Well, it sounds like you're leaning a little bit towards Radiance. Right now, the score is leaning a little bit towards Radiance. 1-0. Let's see if they can close it out or if SSG have what it takes here in Game 2.
Thanks, Gordon Mifflin. Let's go ahead and get into game number 2. It's still Finch and aggro here, and this set still, I imagine, going to be a barn burner here in this one. You heard Mifflin talk a little bit about being worried about Spacestation being able to engage, get in with this composition. Do you see that same problem, and how can SSG overcome it?
I do. I think that the Radiance is a composition that's going to do a lot of the engaging for you, is the good news. I think that we're going to see Aurora blinking in, adapting, using that ultimate. I don't know. I just think that the last few times we've seen Raffer's Xing Chen, I have been uninspired by it, and that's a concern for me that Space is willing to pick it up this early. But by the same token, the last few times we've seen Aurora on Geb, I also haven't been super inspired. So I think that it's really a matter of which of these supports is going to be able to make a bigger impact on gods that maybe they haven't had the best of impact on so far this year.
I wonder if we're in for another long one, too. I mean, these drafts don't necessarily scream early action to me here at this point. Are you sort of expecting another late game crescendo like we got to enjoy in Game 1, or could this one maybe be settled in that 20-minute era?
I mean, this draft for Radiance, I think, does have some potential to snowball out of control. If you get ahead in mid with this mid 3v3, the same can be said for Spacestation. Xing Chen ends up doing a lot of damage when he gets ahead, so it's certainly possible that either team could snowball, but I think both teams are very happy to take it late once again. I mean, this Geb just scales so well into level 20 and into the late game. Kali the same way there for Cherio, Rom here for Cyclone. I think that both teams are probably pretty happy with playing this one slow.
Oh, is that Sam? No, that's Adapting making the pre-2-minute gank over to the left lane, but it has not panned out. Vote wants to get aggressive, but Aurora still had the Geb shield. That is enough for him to stay alive and not give First Blood back over. This first rotation from Adapting doesn't get much. That's why Churio is now moving into the jungle to strip away farm. Tings can't contest by himself, and Churio gets away with the punish.
Adapting going to get at least something on this side of the map with those oracles, but really not a whole lot going. In fact, it's Aurora who nearly died on that left side. Really not Raffer or Vote. Just not really a kill lane by any stretch. Rom Geb is holding their own until late. You know, they're just trying to play nice and slow and nice and patiently at this point in the game. The early gank probably there to try and throw Spacestation off guard because they also expect this lane to just farm until late. But once it doesn't work, I think it's okay. You just gotta accept that that's the way this lane is going. That Cyclone and Aurora should be, for the most part, just trying to stay safe and sit on their hands.
I'm interested to see how Aurora plans on rotating out here in these next few minutes and trying to impact the rest of the map. I mean, normally with Aurora, I'm so clear on it. He's going to be somewhere harassing you, making life miserable. But on this Geb, I feel like that same normal playstyle that Aurora likes to go for is going to be a lot harder to pull off.
I think so too, but I mean, it's possible. Aurora's had some good Geb performances in his career. It's not like he can only play things like Hercules. It's certainly not what the overall evaluation is of Aurora as a player, but in recent history, I think that this pick hasn't been super strong for him, and that's why we've been pretty surprised to see it get locked in as much as it has been for him so far this year. Even, what, 2 times I'd venture a guess to say he's played it. That's 2 more than I probably expected, but we'll see if this can be the one that he turns it around with.
I mean, if he keeps, you know, whoever this Kali is on in the late game alive just long enough, then it's paid already. All its debts are repaid, I would say. They're going to need every bit of that help, because Cheerio showed him last game that he had the damage. Might have to find the ultimate a bit sooner in some of those skirmishes, but certainly a strong performance from him, and a big part of the reason why Spacestation were even keeping that game that close that last time around. But sort of on that same token of adjustments, Radiance are going to have to step up their objective secure this time, because likely they could have put that one to bed a lot sooner if they'd been able to secure any of those 2 Furies or the Fire Giant, those first 3 objectives they lost.
And they didn't really draft for much better objective secure this time around.
That's
I mean,
true.
they played the Raw a decent amount. I'm a little bit surprised to see not go that route, but seems like they want to keep going with the direction they have been, which is just trying to play it slow and patient, and we'll burn objectives when we get the opportunity, but we're going to have to team fight at some point. Going back to the initiation factor here for both teams, no blink for Aurora means that I really do expect this one to be pretty slow burn up until later on in the game.
He likes to go with the full-on shell to start off with. It's a small blue buff invade on the right-hand side that's gotten a lot more serious as adapting dunks in, but Cheerio has a button that says he cannot die. It works there to do its task as Nika tries to close the gap and clean up the kill. Not enough damage from that barrier formation, and adapting should be out at this point, heading back towards his tower, but Nika's giving the pings. But at this point, it's going to be pretty hard to dive to get the kill, so Cheerio will just settle for the blue buff invade.
That's a good rotation in from adapting, a great dunk, and pretty great risk that he took. I mean, you're basically committing to either I'm dying or you're dying. The fact that both Cheerio and adapting live is pretty surprising. Felt like that was going to be a pretty quick first blood there for SSG once Cheerio was able to get that ult off. No beads for him, so I understand the idea from adapting, trying full combo, but just not quite enough burst damage yet.
Didn't quite get the job done. I want to talk a little bit about how Benji has the Celestial Legion helm. Maybe you talk about it after adapting makes his intentions clear on this left side gang. Boat certainly knows he's here at this point, but they're still not that worried about it. And yeah, Raffer doesn't have to push him back out of there. But this first item here for Benji, a lot of the times Jormungandr's got Jade Emperors in this spot. Is this because of some of the recent changes Jade Emperors went through?
Gotta be. I mean, Celestial doesn't feel like an item that I love the passive in this particular game. You know, it's gonna get shredded pretty quickly between the multi-hits of Rend and the ticks of lash damage from Kali 2. It doesn't feel like this passive is super impactful, but the base stats are really what it's there for. And if Benji feels like the typical Jade Emperors is not worth going anymore, then he just wants a physical protection, magical power item. Maybe he feels like this one just feels more effective at a base level because of those nerfs to the Jade Emperors lately.
Yeah, I'll play a really small violin for Jormungandrs that no longer get old Jade Emperors. What a strong item that was. A ton of value in just one purchase. So no sympathy there. But the game's pace continues slowly here for Radiance and Space Station. If game 1 is any indication, though, that doesn't mean it'll stay that way. Things got hectic beyond the 20-minute mark or so in that game 1, so hopefully we're in store for something similar here this time around. As Space Station continuing to aggress into Radiance's side of the map. They've got some extra presence here from Dardes. I think that's why they're looking to fight around this purple buff spawn, but in comes the backup from Radiance, but Aurora takes a ton of poke. Was that all just Dardes on the Merlin? Either way, Adapting takes to the sky, dunks down, and is able to put in good damage with the vote, but they can't keep up the chase, but Tings can. Finds the first blood, pulls Rapper back in, and even with the CC immune ult, he puts Rapper in the dirt.
Beautiful play by Tings, just using that early aggression that Raijin really provides. And now Cherio has leaped in, Raiju a bit off the mark, but a good wall stun from Adapting over the wall might be enough to help his team catch Cherio. But look at the rotation coming from Nika. That's going to free up Cherio to escape. But you see the problem with initiation. I mean, Aurora never gets that ultimate off that whole fight, walking slowly as a rock towards everyone on the enemy team, trying to find it, but the gap closed from Adapting, Cyclone with the long range ult to put some damage out, and then Tings going to show why Raijin is top pick potential. Just so much damage from that ultimate early.
Especially when you consider the level differential between him and Raffer, right? Raffer level 6 and Tings, I think, was level 10 for that skirmish, now level 11. Good stun from Vote, clearly comfortable playing the Hou Yi, but not enough to get the beads out from Cyclone's spin. But we are indeed seeing that Raijin value, and I think Big Man Tings value as well. We don't talk a whole lot about this guy, but he's played really well this year on a star-studded roster, and I think if you got doubts about Tings, they should be settled by now.
Agreed. Dude's a beast. Just mid lane, last year everyone was talking about, oh, you know, everyone's moving to mid, and it feels like every year everyone's talking about how slim the mid pool is as far as players go. I really don't think that's the case, man. I mean, who cares that Dardes role swapped recently, or that Big Man used to be a support, or that even Twig was a jungler last year. Mid lane is really deep right now, and I feel like that's the first time that it's really been that way in a while. But, I mean, top to bottom, I feel like every mid laner has had really, really impressive games. Even the bottom team right now, Obey, I think Wolfie's looked really solid for them so far this year. I think this is probably the deepest the mid lane pool has been in quite some time.
I mean, he talked about how much it helped when Sino took on some of those shot calling duties. Cherio narrowly avoids trouble there in the jungle, and I think that the results are pretty clear to Wolfie's point that he's been able to play a lot better with some of that stuff off his plate. So it's tough to stand out in the mid lane right now, and I think that Big Man Tings is getting it done time and time again. Raffer takes a little bit of poke, but really, this is Space Station continuing to be aggressive. How often have they encroached onto the space of Radiance here this game, constantly moving across that halfway mark into their jungle, and now just walking in and stripping away the purple buff. Not really much that Radiance can do about it.
And they're really leading on this massive lead that Vote has. I mean, he is way up on Cyclone Spin right now, and this is exactly what we saw in the first set of the day, where the first two games Panda's left on an island on this ROM pick and really runs the late game really effectively. And even into the mid game, he you know, you get pretty strong once you finish those first three items. But then in game 3, PK puts heavy weight on that lane early on and really sets him far behind. That's exactly what we're seeing here from Radiance and SSG, where SSG kind of lets Cyclone get to late game. My man goes 10-1 and 9, and they go, yeah, maybe we don't let him do that to us next time. Maybe we should play around that a little bit better. And this time have picked a much better one-on-one hunter and have really set themselves up to put him behind.
Hey man, I wonder if that level 1 gank kind of helped out too. Just maybe a quick reminder for Space Station that, oh yeah, Rom's not doing a whole lot right now, even when they have that 3-on-2 advantage, so maybe they can afford to be a bit more aggressive on the Cyclone Spin. But either way, they've certainly made use of it here this game, punishing them in the jungle at every opportunity. And Radiance, they have responded. They've been there to defend. It's not as if it's gone down for free, but it's just that there's not a whole lot that they can do with this draft. Their best fight really is in that mid 3v3 right now. When Space Station drags the fight over the left-hand side of the map, I think Radiance get a lot less effective as Adapting cannot find the dunk.
And Cherio's been able to really find effective farm so far this game without putting himself out of position. He's keeping pace quite nicely with where Adapting is right now. In fact, he's up less than 100 gold, but up is really the moral of the story here. Just being even or not behind is key for Kali at this point.
That's a big wall stun, and Raffer ain't living after that. Perfect from adapting, and Big Man Tings yet again is having a good game. 3-0-0. Not quite up 2,000 yet or Radiance, but they're in the lead. But this is how they started game 1, right? I think it was 4-0 the start to that game, maybe even all the way up to 6. But they struggle with the objective confirmation. And as you mentioned, it's not as if their confirmation is that much better this time. Agni and Raijin both have those segmented ults with delayed damage. They're going to need some help, I feel like, making sure they confirm these objectives the right way.
Agreed, and I think that's going to be the big tension point moving forward in this game, because now the contest from Space Station is really solid. You've got Nika who can come in and really be disruptive. You've got Dardes and Cherio who can do things like that, which is just speak a Gold Fury out from under you with their objective burn. Vote's ultimate is going to cause problems around objective fights. Radiance continues to fight well early on, but not have great objective control.
Clearly, right, as the Fury gets stolen away from them underneath their noses. I don't know how great they felt about their chances in that fight anyway. They've done much better in these pick-oriented spots, but still, Space Station able to kind of grab that one without any contest from Radiance, and this is starting, I think, to become a bit of a pattern for Radiance. They got to make sure that they're not just objective secure, but their entire game around them looks a bit cleaner.
And so far, I mean, it's really just been waiting for Big Man to do the hard work for us more often than not. I mean, Aurora really hasn't gotten involved in a whole lot. He's got 1 assist so far, but I feel like I've just been watching Aurora walk around up until this point. Right, but he's Geb without Blink.
Geb's early game. I am unfettered in this he's doing nothing for you in the early game. It's not Aurora's fault. It's no help. Right
I mean,
now.
if you have
no help
Blink, if you have Blink, you can at least do something, right? You can at least Cataclysm someone, set someone up for Big Man to take a whole lot of damage. I don't think Aurora's cast that ability yet.
That's a good point. I don't know that we have seen one. I'd have certainly called it Cataclysm. I love to use the whole name for my abilities for some reason. Adapting takes a ton of damage in the middle lane. Has to use the shell and the beads, it looks like. That's a big win for SSG. Tycho drums down for Big Man Tings as well. Only problem is they've already gotten the Fury. What else can they do to capitalize? It looks like a purple buff invade as that falls in favor of Space Station.
Space Station continues to just not be too concerned about what's going on with around the map with the kills. They're just finding farm either way, and that's huge to just get your Kali to the late game and make sure that you're scaling pretty well up until that point.
Dardes in trouble in the back. That's Benji looking for him, but the Merlin able to escape. How, though, will he avoid the ultimate? The first dunk connects. The second one doesn't quite. Dardes used the Aegis, so it does hit, but he immunes the damage. That forces Benji to use the ultimate defensively. Yes, Dardes had to use the Aegis, but surviving there is huge. Radiance's aggression now stalled a bit, as there's not really a lot else for them to do. Perhaps Pyromancer could be on the menu next, but their track record around securing these aren't great as they start to burn it.
Unbelievable that Dardes can get out of base so quickly with the cojones on this man. He knew he was getting hit by that ult and didn't Aegis it and lived with like 15 health. Didn't even phase him. He just kept on walking underneath the tier 1 tower. That is unbelievable that he saves it for the second hit and ends up baiting it out perfectly. Crazy. Doesn't end up mattering that much. He still gets forced back. Still opens up the Pyromancer, but Dardes is a far braver man than I can tell you that much.
That's true. I mean, remember Radiance's bravery from last game with that fight over in right. Never really, I mean, they tried to get their backs off, but I think they had an opportunity and they chose to engage in the fight, and it worked out for them. Titan living with 2k HP. So we've got some either well-calculated plays or some optimistic plays, but either way, these two teams are the best of the best that we've got right now. I know Radiance have slumped a little bit here lately, but I think that when they get back on the groove, man, this is one of those teams you absolutely have to look out for. Them, Rival Space Station, and Sanguine, for me, are the bars that everyone else are looking up at.
And PK, got to give them credit, too, after their win over
they've been playing well
today. So they've been pretty hot as of late as well.
Cherio able to find the stun and adapting in the backline. Destruction gives him time to stay close as Vote drops the Suns. That cuts off the escape path. Easy up kill. What about Aurora? He is stuck in between everyone, and Nika gets the second kill of this engagement. Benji wants to try and get involved too, uses his ultimate. Can't find Vote with the second charge. This third one has to be for disengage, but he comes back in again, at least close to Cyclone Spin, looking for damage, trying to lock down these carries in the back. Gets the first one with the breath, and Cyclone Spin still alive. Tings makes it out as well, but Dardes collapses back onto him. Cyclone Spin will fall, and Benji all alone might not be able to find much more.
Dardes is out of mana entirely. If Benji could get close enough, I think that Spit would do it. He's got a lot of power in the build now that he has that Stone of Fall in that in that third slot, and then Ethereal Staff fourth. So Benji's gone mostly power out of hybrid items. Stone of Fall, an item we don't see a whole lot of. It really makes him pretty tanky whenever he's near a roar, and 70 feet is the radius of that passive, and that is very large. That's double auto attack range almost. So you're looking at pretty far for that passive range with 80 power. But even with all that power for Benji and the lead that he has, that fight still doesn't go well because Cyclone is just so far behind. He's not able to output nearly as much damage as he was last game. Tings gets forced out of that fight pretty early, which is smart by SSG. Look at the experience gap all of a sudden in the jungle. 3-level difference between Cherio and Adapting. Wow. It's really just been the big man Tings and Benji carry projects here in game number 2. And those two feel like have really managed to almost single-handedly keep Radiance close.
You think a little bit about that Fury that goes down earlier, largely uncontested. I mean, the game is so close now that even one Fury does not a big difference make, but it feels like that cut into some of that early momentum that Radiance had going, and I mean that very literally. That was an objective where maybe they could have forced a fight when they had their objective, or when they had the advantage, and instead they end up giving that one away for free. Benji's over here with them. Looks like we're fully grouped up at this point in the game, but can't find much there.
And you want to fight around Benji all that you can at this point. You know beads are down for Dardes. You know Aegis is down for Vote. I like the idea here from Radiance, but Aurora's got to get a reset off because he's level 12 and hasn't backed for that Relic. I think that Radiance's team fight's going to transform once Aurora picks up Blink, assuming he goes Blink in that slot. Up until now, it's been pretty hard for them to find initiation opportunities, but I think once Aurora picks up that Relic, it might get easier.
Should allow him to get involved. He will indeed pick up the Blink in that second spot. We've talked about it. I mean, Geb hadn't gotten to do a whole lot up until this point, but we're starting to get into that part of the game where Geb does shine, where the Geb shields are so impactful, where Cataclysm is such a big tool in these team fights everyone else is trying to deal with. So if Aurora's going to shine, now and onward is the time, I feel like, for him to do it. And he's got big man teams behind him, an artillery cannon at this point, so plenty of follow-up will be there if Radiance can find a way to be the aggressors. But this game is virtually dead even. I mean, the biggest problem for them really is the jungle right now for Radiance.
I mean, eventually, Adapting will catch up in XP. It's just, It's going to take a little bit at this point, and he's not going to be as effective as Cherio even when he does catch up in XP. Radiance got to be careful. Gold Fury's already low again.
And Adapting goes in first. Radiance grab the Primal Fury, and they're stuck inside the Tycho drums, but he doesn't get that much value. It brings Cherio and Nika all the way down and gets the Sentinel of Zeus out from Space Station solo laner. Radiance finally with a good fight around an objective. Now they'll group up and try and force down the tier 1. Great clear from range for Dardes, cuts that off, but they're not going to stop and worry about this objective. Instead, they're going to head over towards the Pyromancer, it looks like, here for Radiance, and see if they can force that fight and make Space Station come to them.
Man, that was huge by Radiance to get in there and steal away that Gold Fury and then walk right on over and get the Pyromancer. And that's a great example of how you can create a whole lot of space and get in a pretty good position where you can really get not even get kills, but get the objective. Adapting's right on top of it. Aurora Blink Cataclysm does work that time around, and great synergy between those two on that timing. And that's the difference. I mean, you get an objective like that, you steal it away, you do a lot of damage, you force relics, you force everyone back. It creates so much more map pressure for you to do what you want.
The Pyromancer was that first thing for Radiance, but what more could they do? I mean, I doubt their advantage feels good enough to where they're trying to force Fire Giants like right this second, but this is big. This is how Radiance start to move back into that point where they're in control, where they can dictate some fights on their pace. And I feel like it's worth trying to give a little bit more definition when we say things like momentum. When you're the team that's forcing relics or forcing fights or those types of things, it gives you so much more of an opportunity, I feel like, Aggro, to be the one deciding where the next fight or the next thing ends up happening because of what you force from your opponent.
Completely agree. That's a huge part of competitive Smite, is being the one in control.
Oh, Benji's in trouble. No control over how that situation went. Cherio cuts him down quick. And just like that, I mean, a fight that we thought Radiance were going to be able to start up in their favor is a 5v4 now for Space Station instead. They don't head to Fire Giant right away, though. Head towards mid, clear that up, and start pushing down this Tier 1 tower and force Radiance in.
That's big, because Benji has been such a key part of this early game here for Radiance and putting them in this position to win.
Cherio does get the ultimate off in time, and Cyclone Spin doesn't have that same luxury, but Aegis gets him to the back of the Tier 2 in time. Adapting takes to the sky, but if he goes in, it'll be a solo mission. I think rightfully so, he elects to come back. This is another reason why Space Station should feel pretty good about fighting. Everything that Adapting does that isn't power farming right now feels pretty good for Space Station.
It's a good point. You want to keep Adapting on the hook, basically. In every fight, you got to make him feel like he's making a tough choice to either give up farm or give up fighting to go and get that farm. But credit to Adapting. I think for a large part of his career, he prioritizes farm over fighting maybe a little bit too much. I think that he's understood his job in this game, which is, I don't care if I'm not doing as much. I've just got to be there, or else Space Station's going to snowball this game out of control. And he's been very effective despite being down in levels.
Especially because Tings is leading all players in damage with Benji right behind. I know Adapting might not be quite as relevant as he'd like, but his wall stun, his Anvil of Dawn dunk, those are still big tools for them. But Space Station starting up the Fire Giant, Benji nearby, and does have the ultimate, so this will not be going down for free. Cherio still doesn't have relics in the back of the fight either. Tings goes up to the Taiko drums, and Radiance are able to strip the objective away. Now Rapper in trouble in the back line. Tings cuts him down too, doing it all for Radiance as SSG can't secure.
Man, it's the big man Benji show, man. I'll tell you what, this Radiance team, so much of it is around this huge, star power of the duo lane that has won a world championship recently, Adapting the 2-time in the jungle. But don't forget about Benji's world championship. People better start to put some respect on big man Tings' name, because he's popping off.
Well, Space Station are going to go for a Tier 2 tower defense. Cherio finds a 2-man stun, but Benji has already gotten to Dardes in the back. Cherio does get one. Now Aurora is stuck in a bad spot, but Adapting takes care of Vote. It's a double for Cherry, and now Cyclone Spin is left alone. A great roll. What a juke. Lets him get back towards Adapting, so perhaps he can survive, but the Tier 2 tower lives. Cherio, Nika, Raffer, they're all still standing, and Radiance are the ones on the back foot.
But no Aegis here for Cyclone. Feel like this is a tough spot for him to get out of. Cherio, no relics. Good spacing on that wall means that Cyclone's going to have a tough time getting away, or at least Adapting's going to lose his life for it.
That was a good shot from Cyclone. It did bring Cherio low. Probably the only reason he's not being chased right now, but a Whirlwind of Rage and Steel brings him back towards Nika. They don't have a ton of damage, these two, so Cyclone Spin could potentially sustain his way through, but feels like a bit of a losing effort. But he's got Benji coming. I don't know if Space Station realized there's backup on the way. Raffer able to get out of there. He and Nika probably done with disengaging for now. They at least force out the blink on the back end. But remember how this starts, Aggro. I mean, Radiance, with the Fire Giant, are trying to push down a Tier 2 in mid.
But they hadn't reset off of sealing that objective. They hadn't gone back, spent the gold, really gotten those ultimates back up is the big thing. The fact that both Benji and Big Man were without their ults in that fight makes it a much more appealing fight for Space Station. I think that's great identification from SSG, knowing that, yes, Radiance has fire, yes, they just got a bunch of momentum, but Taiko Drums, the ability that's really ruined us, alongside World Serpent, the other one that's caused us a whole lot of problems, are both on cooldown right now, and there's no way they could be up for this fight. And they take a very intelligent fight that I think caught Radiance a bit off guard.
And we talk a lot about the merits of those types of fights, not just with the cooldown state, but with that gold state, right? That's the difference between giving your opponents a 7 or 8k gold lead for free, or just taking the 2 to 3k deficit you're currently staring at. It's a tough decision, but I think those ultimate cooldowns made it a bit easier for SSG to decide to play some defense. They eventually lose that tier 2 tower. That is a little bit of gold in Radiance's pocket, a little bit more map control, but largely Spacestation have taken a lot of the fire out of this Fire Giant buff. So now the Primal Fury started up by Radiance, but Spacestation are fully here. This won't be going down uncontested. Radiance grab the Fury, and the fight on the backside kicks off.
Raffer, no blink. They got that at the very end of that last fight, and ultimates are all right now for Radiance, but just not enough distance to cover for the backline to be able to catch up with Benji. So good patience by him. Doesn't want to get that fight started in a bad spot. And after all this hybrid power for him in this build, he finishes it off, or nearly finishes, with this high to the Nemean Lion, just to give a little bit more dissuasion to vote in Cherio when they try and kill him. Also has those thorns. I like this kind of mishmash of builds. Sometimes builds like this that are pretty heavily leaning towards damage early on, and then some heavy defense late, kind of feel like they don't do anything well. But I think that Benji's found a pretty good balance here with this build. It feels like he's been effective in both frontlining and damage output.
It's been a great set for Benji. I mean, I talked to him in that interview you all saw before the set started about his consistency this year and how well I'd felt he played, but it sounded like Benji didn't think that he was quite at that consistency level that he wanted to be. Well, maybe we can roll this tape back for him and let my man know. He's been playing at a pretty high level for as long as he's been doing it, but clearly his standards for himself are even higher. Now a bit of a grouping around this Fire Giant on the right-hand side. 30 seconds before this Fire Giant spawns. So no need to get too crazy before it actually spawns.
No, especially even over Pyromancer. It's fine to give up Pyro in a position like this where you've got gold to spend. You know, you want to go back and get a full set of sentry wards. That's exactly what Radiance do. They got 4 sentries. Benji here just to make sure that SSG can't just pull fire randomly and sneak one away like they did earlier on. And now you're going to come back and you're going to be able to dominate the vision game around this Fire Giant.
It's double upgraded shell as the relics for Radiance. One for adapting, one for Aurora too. That's going to make Cherio's life a lot harder when he's diving that backline, potentially boats as well. But I gotta imagine those are anti-Cheerio buttons that they will happily push when the Kali is diving. Spacestation here for the defense though, but Radiance with control over this neutral ground around the FG.
Wonder what Radiance is waiting for. They don't even want to feign a pull right away. They're pretty willing to spread out, and not knowing exactly where Cheerio is, it makes sense that they're giving SSG some respect, but without Cheerio here, this fight does get a lot harder for SSG. Now Nika gonna back to base. I mean, this is basically SSG rolling the dice that Radiance won't just decide to start this up. They're rolling well so far. Seems like they're right for the time being.
Yeah, we could use some of these rolls in D&D, man. Sometimes it's not going so well, but Radiance still
Yeah, for
patient.
Dave in particular.
Yeah, or so. Not the best, though. They'll start this one up, though. Cyclone Spit pulling the Fire Giant down to about half. Raffer steps in, loses a good bit of damage, too. But the Fire Giant fully reset at this point. Cheerio blinks in, gets beads out from Tings, and forces him to disengage. Nika drops his ultimate as well. That is going to slow Aurora at the front of the fight. They'll even pick him up with Raffer's ultimate and bring him back. 2 ultimates used onto Aurora without much value. Tycho Drums isn't getting much either, as a lot of ults are used without really a whole lot coming from it. Aurora blinks in. Cataclysm, they decide to all-in commit to kill Raffer. It ends up working. He falls, but Benji could be in trouble on the right-hand side. Regroups with Adapting and Tings and should be out of there, but Aurora gets caught by Cheerio, gets away from that too, and Radiance are still A-okay.
Man, that engagement start from Cheerio was so strong. I mean, Blink stun,
Right.
caught both Adapting and Big Man, got double beads and shell out, but it just doesn't end up really amounting to a whole lot because Raffer's initiation after the fact is pretty lackluster. Benji just creates so much space. Even when Raffer picks up Aurora, no one wants to be next to him because then that's Cataclysm. That, you know, you're basically just blinking Aurora into your backline for you. So
Right.
the backline backs up. And Benji's creating such a threat that they don't feel like they can step up and just pre-beat the Cataclysm and kill Aurora through that anyways. Still, they only kill Raffer for Radiance, and now he's back up. He's got a pretty short respawn timer. So I feel like they didn't really get a whole lot off that fight themselves.
They didn't, and they're missing some pretty key relics. Tings and Adapting, as you mentioned already, don't have beads. There will be no shell at all for Radiance for this fight either. So if I'm Space Station, despite losing Raffer, I don't know. I might feel a bit favored coming into this next one because my backline, Dardes and Vote, have all their relics available for this next skirmish.
Yeah, Adapting's got to play this fight very, very awkwardly because he's been so key in diving in and getting relics and doing damage with that Anvil of Dawn, but now without a single relic for him, he really can't do that safely.
Oni Fury's going down, but Cheerio has sniffed it out. That means that Cyclone Spin has to give up the objective. Great work by Cherry to at least come put some eyes on this Oni Fury the second it spawns so that it cannot be stripped away. That was with Benji in mid, trying to be the deterrent without giving up the game that the Oni Fury is being burned, and still Cheerio ran right by to check.
May as well, because that Oni Fury is really the easiest gateway to opening up a Fire Giant pool for your team. And as a result, everyone from both teams decide to stop worrying about Fire Giant so much, as that's so much harder to confirm, and instead let their carries rotate over towards Oni.
Oni Fury's low and Space Station steal it away, plus Cyclone takes a ton of damage. He goes up with the ultimate, but lands back down right into the ultimate from Nika. Cheerio leaps over the Taiko drums and drops with the destruction. Even with big damage from Cyclone Spin, he cuts through him. Dardes gets one. Cheerio finds the double. Big man Ting's in trouble too, but Boat wants to get in on the fun, so they cut down the Raijin just like that. Space Station find a 4 for 0. There's a lot of towers left up on the map, but this is eating time if you're SSG.
That might just be game. No wave here, but Oni wave is pushing with you. Cherio's doing a good job making sure Benji doesn't just to get back to base. This is going to be at least mid-Phoenix. Don't know if it's going to be quite an end call with the health bars the way they are, but not looking great right now for Radiance.
No, this looks bad. Cheerio not going to allow Benji to find the backer. We're still 15 seconds from Aurora joining them. I think that Space Station Gaming have done enough. Now remember, with 2 towers still up, there is some extra Titan health, and Benji is finally getting the back off. But no, I forgot Merlin was here for SSG. That's just too much damage. No way they're going to defend against all of that. Space Station in 33 minutes take us all the way to Game 3.
Just a really weird decision, though, by Cyclone on that Oni Fury. I mean, let's say best case scenario happens and he does secure Oni. He still got pulled into Merlin damage and he's way out of position at that point. But Dardes walks up slowly and Merlin combos the Oni Fury, and Cyclone just is kind of cool with that. A really odd and uncharacteristic mistake that I think completely throws that game there for Radiance. They just have no shot at winning that fight when Cyclone gets pulled that far in, takes that much damage, has to ult right away, uses both relics. It causes the whole team to come and try and peel for him in a situation where you can just never win that fight afterwards.
Does that count then as an Oni Fury win for these guys? I mean, they didn't even push with the waves necessarily. I'll chalk it up to a win off the back of an Oni Fury. We're going to be right back with game number 3, though, in just a moment. Give us a break to get everything sorted, and we'll bring in that third game.
Hot.
Well, welcome back, everyone. After a brief break, I hope you got your snacks, your drinks, anything you might have needed to collect, because it is going to go to Game 3 here, with SSG winning the fight. And Mifflin, the theme of the set so far seems to be no objective is safe.
You're absolutely right. I mean, just to start off that game, Radiance gets their Gold Fury stolen away, and then immediately they steal a Fire Giant away from SSG. Don't start objectives if you're playing against either one of these teams, because you're not going to get it. You have to be the second one there, and you have to get incredibly lucky, but steals seem to be the name of the game in this set.
I mean, there's seemingly, we can watch a lot of action that comes through in a lot of that, but it is kind of built around the pillars that feel like the steals throughout all of that one. Specifically, I mean, even the end of the game is an Oni Fury steal. There just happened to be a really big fight right there after that was a 4-for-0 trade. So I think SSG just understand where they need to get aggressive, and they kind of played the long con to Cherio's strength.
They did. And SSG choosing to take that fight around Oni is incredibly smart, because they know that they're going to have the siege potential. They know that they have that 5-man stack, so they can move in as a cohesive unit, whereas Cyclone Spin immediately gets caught out, gets dragged deep into the backline. And then from there, Radiance, almost in a fit of stubbornness, decides, well, we got to go in. We're not going to let our man Cyclone Spin die alone. And instead, he dies with 3 of his buddies, and Benji, the lone survivor, not quite able to keep that game alive. I don't know, it seemed like they could have just backed up there, accepted the fact that Cyclone had died, and then buckled down for a 4v5 defense around a Phoenix or a tier 2 tower. But stubbornness, I guess, it really is all that it really came down to.
So, Mifflin, I'm completely distracted because the only thing I've learned that makes more noise than one dog squeaking a squeaky toy while you're trying to do an analyst segment is 2 dogs squeaking squeaky toys behind you while you're doing an analyst segment. And I don't know what their thoughts are about who's going to be winning this set, but they seem pretty well distracted as of right now. So objectives may be safe. Fenrir not going to get locked in. But, to get back more on subject, the 50-50 that Radiance keeps pulling around these objectives, is it worth all of the steals that have been coming through? Like, is it still worth maybe putting that much pressure on them, even though you never know if you're going to actually be able to control them.
I think it is worth it insofar as you're forcing Space Station to respond to your aggression. Maybe don't go for the 50-50 confirm, but at least try and force a fight on them. We know every single time Radiance starts up an initial Gold Fury or a Pyromancer, they know they're starting it because they feel like they're favored in the fight. It's just maybe a miscommunication on whether or not we actually want to take that fight. The Gold Fury gets really low. They think to themselves, well, we can't reset it now. It's only 4 or 5 auto attacks away, but the same can be said for SSG. It's only 4 or 5 auto attacks away, and they're already there. Maybe shift up your playstyle, put the aggression back on, but shift your focus away from these coin toss objectives and more so towards these 5-on-5 engagements.
Well, let's see if any of the playstyle shifts happen around these gods. So far, well, the answer is no. It's Camazotz, it's the Emoja, it's the Aphrodite, it's the King Arthur, but a new mix picked up here. We're not going to get to see Adapting Store this time around. I like that SSG take that away. He's been finding some pretty solid dunks. The Ull has been down there, but trading out this Thor, is it worth taking it away from Adapting? Has that been kind of the big part of Radiance's game plan?
I think taking Adapting off Thor and forcing him onto something that he's less comfortable on, especially considering he's already played it for about an hour and a half now in this 3-game set. Now he's going to have to shift up his entire playstyle. His hands are warm on Thor. We'll see if he can do it on a different god. I would have liked to see some sort of target bans towards BMT. This guy's been playing absolutely lights out the entire day, and if they don't do anything to slow him down, I don't see any reason why he'll stop doing exactly that.
Well, Merlin locked in there, but Radiance, they scoop something away from Cherio. They're going to go ahead and try to give the Kali a try here. And again, she can do a ton, but it's kind of a timer as to when she's going to be able to get aggressive. They also take the Rom away, who you've been a pretty big fan of, and I think the teams as a whole have been a fan of this weekend. We've seen a lot of him, and he's been doing pretty decently in lane.
I mean, Cyclone's been piloting Rom incredibly well. He's a very versatile god. The main failing of Rom before this buff was his laning phase, and now he's got some sustain in his kit. He's got some additional burst potential, so he can take these 1v1s. I think Rom really is skyrocketing his way up the tier list, and when Cyclone's playing it, I said it last game, and I'm going to say it again, it really does look like an incredibly top-tier hunter. I think taking away the Kali from Cherio might be a huge step here. He's been having a decent performance. A couple times he just kind of forgets to press 4, but still, the ability to shred the backline, the ability to just absolutely be a late-game chainsaw is now going to be removed from SSG.
Well, we finally get that Khepri to come through here for Raffer. One of the things we got to talk about early on, I think it was banned in the 2 prior games. The Geb was taken away from him in the last game, so he hasn't really gotten that chance to show us what he can do on these more, I guess, supporty-oriented Guardians than maybe something more aggressive. But there with the Hu Yi, it's going to be interesting. But Kali, Rom, and Raijin's hard for me to argue against, so it's something I'll pit for you once we get through these bans. Erlong Shen and Xing Chen going to be taken off the board. Serket is going to be joining that jungle ban from Radiance. And SSG, it kind of feels like a multifaceted target, right? You want to hit a little bit of the support, but you do still have to hit some of that solo lane, but they're going to opt to try and strip some more of that support pool away with the Terra going to the wayside as well.
I like it. Get rid of the aggressive support so that Khepri has a little bit easier time in that laning phase. But normally, when we see Raffer on this Khepri, which for my money is Raffer at his best, he's usually paired with Cherio playing the Kali to have that additional death immunity, to have this huge late-game dive potential inside of one character. I imagine we'll see something similar out of the jungle, something that Cherio can really go in deep with, find the huge damage, and then have that reliance on the Scarab's Blessing to get him out safely and get to try again if he doesn't get a kill, or get another kill if it works. Pele fits that.
Well, hey, maybe the Lasper special coming through here for SSG onto Cherio there, which is an interesting pickup. I mean, Pele is not necessarily a weak jungler by any means, but not a lot of teams pick her up, and Nike coming through. Well, we saw that she could control the solo lane well enough last time, unless you think there's going to be any kind of shenanigans here. How do you feel about the Pele fitting into this mix? It sounded like you agreed with it, but just to make sure, does it fit with the Nike, the Khepri, the Hu Yi, and the Merlin?
It is really strong. It's going to be one of your main sources of backline dive. Nike's going to have some of that, but it's not something like a King Arthur or an Osiris who's able to just hold W and walk at you. Pele has that, but I'm worried about if this game goes late, which the rest of the games in this set have, that 1v1 potential that we see around the Dance of the Fire Giant. Usually you see the junglers shift towards the middle of the map, and they try and brawl it out a little bit before the engagement actually starts. Pele versus Kali? I don't know, man. Pele just kind of loses that.
It's not going to be a very strong matchup for her. We'll have to see if SSG can overcome the mountain that Radiance has built in front of them. It's game 3. Let's go down to the casters.
The decider match. Thank you, Gore and Mifflin. Fenton Aggro still here as we get ready for game 3. And what a set it has been, Aggro. And we now see the change as we come into this last match with Adapting will take the Kali away from Cheerio. We see Rapper on Khepri, which has become one of his signature picks. What's caught your eye here to start this one off?
Yeah, it's definitely the Kali being taken away from Cheerio, I think, is the big key, because Cherry has just been really, really difficult to deal with in the late game for both games 1 and 2. But Rapper going back to this Khepri pick, I mean, last game, I kind of framed it as which support's going to be able to be more effective with gods they haven't been super effective with recently. I'd argue neither was super effective anyways.
Yeah.
The game just kind of happened around them, but this time they're both uncomfortable.
Okay, goodbye to Nika. Adapting finds an early rotation over to Solo, and that's first blood there for Radiance. That is a problem if you're SSG. Kali does not normally start off like this.
No, that first blood, but this is a really smart gank by Adapting that will catch solo laners off guard if they just don't do their due diligence and place their ward where they should early on, their free ward that they get. It's just blink into stun. Nika's still level 1. It's pretty hard for them to hit level 2 until a little bit later because of the startup blue that a lot of solo laners are doing, and junglers hit level 2 pretty quickly, so they just pop right back over after hogging back camps and get themselves a pretty free kill, and it's just absolutely ideal that it goes over to Adapting and not Benji.
You know what's so funny? You know, you were talking about how we might need more of Adapting playing less of that old kind of wait-and-see, farm-it-out style around the side of the fights where he can be so patient normally. But with this Kali, I feel like this is a great time to go back to that version of Adapting. I mean, Kali picks her moments so well, and now with this lead, it wouldn't be nearly as punishing, I feel like. It's a small lead, obviously, but it wouldn't be nearly as punishing to be on the back foot for a bit.
I think it's a good point. I mean, you'd certainly have that option. Roar's in trouble, but Raffer decides not to use that Abduct, a little bit too close to the tower. Doesn't want to end up taking a tower shot by accident. Don't think he used it to close the gap just by the way Roar was playing it. Looks like he was scared of that threat, but maybe Raffer a little bit too low on mana. Khepri is pretty mana hungry in the earlier stages of the game, and something that you have to watch out for, especially as support's not getting mana potions or multi-potions anymore because that second consumable slot is often taken up by the Hand of the Gods.
Still, Radiance narrowly avoid kind of giving it all back over here in the long lane, and that nice start for them, but they do a good job not giving any kills over to Vote and Raffer. Vote going to be on the Ho Yi this time as Cyclone Spin gets his 3rd game in a row on this new ROM pick. And I think Cyclone Spin has looked good on it. His snipes weren't always on point, but he hit enough of them as Cheerio and Adapting continue to trade blows over on the right-hand side. So seeing Cyclone Spin back on this ROM again could be good looks here for Radiance.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the big key, is can Cyclone withstand the early pressure in the exact same matchup that he had last time around. But now you've got a Ganesh instead of a Geb, which is a huge difference in terms of help push in that left-hand side, how much pressure that your Guardian's going to provide for you early on in the game. So I think that Cyclone, as long as Roar's here, is going to be a little bit healthier and a little bit safer. But I'm excited to see if he can keep his balance a little bit better than what happened last time, where he was down 2 levels from a pretty early on point in the game.
Some of that got to be down, as you mentioned, those supports, but this will be our chance to see, right? I mean, 2 games in a row, that's more of a trend, so we might learn something there. Aurora is looping underneath, but he doesn't have Dharmic Pillar, so this isn't that frightening, but Adapting is on his way. They lock down Aurora inside the Suns. He gets the turnaround silence, and Vote has nowhere to go. It's a 2nd kill now for Adapting on this Kali.
huge that Aurora lives as well, just to be sure that Vote doesn't get any sort of additional help. Dash forward from Raffer to reset the backs, but just really try to delay the back actually of adapting to make sure that the speed buff invade that Cheerio is going for on the right-hand side goes off successfully. Pretty heads up there by Raffer to open that up, and that actually is the difference to make sure that Cheerio can get that speed quickly enough.
Dardes had pressure in mid too, so Tings couldn't safely rotate over to try and contest. And it's a low-risk move up there for Raffer, right? With how low Adapting and Aurora were, it was basically just Cyclone Spin's ability to independently lock him down and burn him from full health, which is non-existent. So just good call there, I think, from Raffer, as you said, to kind of stay heads up. So that is part of what good teams do. I know that's kind of a smaller play, but that is what good teams do when it looks like disaster is looming. They find those small ways to at least get something back. So instead of 1,500 out in front, you know, it's 1,200 or 1,000 or something like that. It's what the best teams do all the time.
You got to get your wins where you can, and even if it's not getting kills, it's, you know, pressure elsewhere on the map. Aurora with some really good presence of mind, by the way, to toss out that Ohm, not necessarily for the silence, which does help in that instance, but mostly for that extra protection that you get while channeling that Ohm. That's what that little circle is around the Ganesh, is the extra protection area, and that little bit of prots absolutely saved his life in that gank.
He was stuck inside the Suns. Things would have certainly been bad for him, but good work with them, that extra help. Adapting could take care of the Alpha Harpy, but no gank attempt on this left-hand side. And it's worth, I think, talking a bit about what Cheerio has done during all this, because this early game has been very active for Adapting here so far, but Cheerio has just kept farming. I say that, but now he's looking for a gank. Aurora stuck in the Suns again. Dharmic Pillar to keep Cheerio zoned out, but they don't even need him. Vote burns him down quick. So now Adapting is to win the 1v1, but Cheerio hasn't used his ult yet, and that's enough to push Adapting away. Meanwhile, Benji, looking to come down and steal away some of these back Harpies with the jungles in left, gets caught out by Nika.
No boots here for Benji, so he's certainly a lot slower on this engagement, but with that extra movement speed, still has the ult as well. Don't think Nika really has true kill potential on this rotation anyways. Good idea to force the ult out. Maybe Nika does have kill potential.
Yeah, if that ult is maybe a little bit later timed, that could have worked, but able to make it out of there is Benji, but Cheerio dies underneath the tower, knows he has the Scarab's blessing at his back, gets rezzed, and there's nothing Aurora can do but watch. Suddenly, the game has evened back up. I asked, what is Cheerio going to do as a response? Well, how about ganking duo and mid? Not bad.
Setting big man Tings behind, too, was such an impact player in game number 2 that you really love to see Cheerio's focus happen in the mid lane. Raffer is in the perfect position again to get that Khepri res off. I mean, it just feels like it's night and day in effectiveness for Raffer when it's this Khepri pick, doesn't it? I mean, he just feels like he's so much more impactful on the map from minute 1.
It does feel as though he plays, I don't know, maybe more comfortable, something like that. It's like he knows his limits. He knows the line that he can walk right up to on this Khepri pick very comfortably, and it's worked out well for him. Cyclone Spin using the ult for a chance to steal purple. That's a low percentage play, I'd argue, but at least go for it. It doesn't cost you a whole lot. And if you do steal purple, it's a nice little boom.
And remember, with this new ROM, you get that ultimate back pretty quickly, it feels like, so you're using even less of a resource than before.
Vote steps in, the silence is there, but now he's stuck inside the Suns. The roll from Cyclone Spin almost works, but he walks back into the Dharmic Pillars, takes the damage, and ends up falling. Not the Dharmic Pillars, but back into Raffer, and ends up falling. So Cyclone Spin ends up falling on that left-hand side in the 2v2. No junglers a part of that one. They just lose the fight.
And this was one of the main concerns. You brought it up to Benji, that Aurora and Cyclone have had trouble during laning phases so far this year. Not the first time they've struggled, and it seems to be continuing.
Big man Tings, he just didn't have the information, I don't think, for those first 2 shots, so he couldn't connect them onto Nika, who was able to evade. That was the difference, I think, between getting that kill and not. Nika was aggressively looking around in the jungle when the big man Tings and Benji showed up to stop them. But yeah, man, this long lane, and not just their ability to fight in the long lane, but Cyclone Spin in particular, his propensity to be put behind has hurt this team before.
And now you're behind in that exact same matchup as last game. Ho Yi pushes that lead better than just about any other hunter in the game. Really hard to get away from this god when he gets a lead.
Cyclone Spin in trouble as Cherio won't even let him get off the ground. Relentless pressure on this left-hand side of the map, and so far Radiance haven't had the answer. That great start from adapting has been completely washed away.
Nowhere where he can match up with the Pele now. I mean, he's 2-0, and it just doesn't matter because Cherio is level 10 and is 1-0-2. You want to talk about a perfect execution on that Pele play, you need to go back and rewatch that one because it's perfect auto canceling. The way that Cherio actually slides to the side as he's casting that ultimate to make sure that every part of his pyroclasm hit from the one is coming back to him and putting Cyclone in position to get hit by all of them.
Raffer has to ult himself here in the middle lane, so he should fall on the back end of it, but the Tycho drums are used for damage. It ends up being enough, but that was close. Probably wouldn't have liked to have to use all those ults, but they do get that kill into Raffer to slow him down a bit. But as you mentioned, it was excellent play from Cherio to get the kill earlier. Now this death for Raffer in mid does hurt them a bit, but this has been a much better sort of comeback here for Space Station to mitigate this pressure from Radiance.
And this composition from Space Station still scales pretty well. I would argue that Radiance scales better just because they have this Ama and this Kali, two gods that really team fight really well later on. But Space Station feels like they've got a lot more of a lead than the numbers really dictate. They might be able to start getting that number up pretty quickly. I mean, it's only been one Gold Fury so far. It was done so early that it's really not worth that much gold. But Cherio is clearly not comfortable letting Radiance find farm anywhere on the map.
No.
They're playing up as much as they can.
And they should, man. Space Station are using this pressure well. Benji, though, is looking around the map for what he can find. Unfortunately, there is nothing there. So Raffer on the back of the tier 1 just taking his poke, but not a whole lot to get. It's worth mentioning, remember earlier we saw the Shogun's Kusari for the Amaterasu so that you could still get the attack speed boost. This time it is that Berserker Shield, so it looks like that is just dependent on the magical physical lane opponent.
Yeah, I like the switch up here from Benji. I mean, he still clearly wants to go in that attack speed area, and it makes sense with how you want to play Ama in the mid to late game. You just want to be able to get 3 autos on the target that you need really quickly and then start using your abilities after the fact. But hitting those 3 autos is super important to lead off that fight, whether it's on an objective or a player. So getting some extra attack speed in the build early on makes your sustain better, makes it feel better to clear your buffs and clear your wave, and transitions well into the late game.
Clearly the call from SSG is aggression. Ultimate from Cherio kills Cyclone Spin again, and he uses the beads. It's got to be frustration starting to set in a little bit here for Radiant. A Space Station, I talk about the halfway line a lot in this map. They're up past the 70% line. They're always in Radiance's jungle. They're not giving them even a bit of farm for free.
Back camps, nowhere is safe right now for Radiance. Not even the safest of farm that you could usually find. And it's really Cherio who's just putting the pedal to the metal. It feels like Cherry had somewhere to be later on the night. He doesn't want to be here any longer. He's trying to end this one quick.
Yeah, I'm not going 45 minutes again like game 1, guys. Let's put this to bed. Certainly not out of reach for Radiance by any metric, but this is looking good for Space Station. Certainly a good trajectory that they're on and have been able to maintain. For the first time, Dardes has a lead on Tings in the middle lane. Tings has farmed very well so far this game. Either that or he's been given some farm, but for game number 3, it's Dardes that's out in the lead on the back of all this extra farm SSG are getting.
It's because Dardes is free to solo mid waves because Cherio's diving Cyclone over and over again. He's got nothing else to worry about right now. He's not splitting mid waves with you. He's splitting kill XP with Vote over here on the left-hand side pretty consistently, or he's constantly on these buffs. Cherio is just not worried about his own back camps. Those are kind of been left for Nika and for Dardes. That's an easy way to get ahead.
Good beads from Cherio, lets him get away from Adapting's initial stun. Cyclone Spin hits the first, but misses the final 2 shots of the snipe, so Cherio survives easily. Now Tings is in trouble. The ultimate doesn't quite get Cherio there, so Tings makes it up and over the wall, but Space Station continually forcing Radiance to have to decide, can we contest, do we retreat? And it's been close on the calls every time.
I mean, Cherio uses his ult there and doesn't really find a lot, but it forces Tings up and over the wall and forces him back to base, and that opens up the red buff. And if you ask every jungler, are you down trading your ult for the enemy red on cooldown, they're all going to tell you yes. So it doesn't really matter that the ultimate doesn't end up finding a kill. It ends up finding the pressure that he was looking for anyways. You're not going to get as far ahead as you used to with these buff invades. I mean, that reduced XP and gold for your enemy buffs being dropped in comparison to your own, it definitely stops it from snowballing completely out of control. But it's going to happen eventually if this trend continues.
Dardas took a lot of damage, held onto his relics though, so he's still A-okay. Radiance have everyone but Benji on this side of the map, and they are now pulling the Primal Fury. But how comfortable can you feel with Cheerio, who's red hot right now, looming in the wings? It looks like not comfortable at all. Radiance give it up, fully disengage, and Space Station are right back to the aggression, considering going forward, but they stop. Stay back instead. Maybe Raffer can find the loop around onto adapting. No abduct there, so everyone just heads back to farming.
And Vote is 3.5 levels over Cyclone right now. Cyclone was just level 11, dinged over to 12 on the last wave. So yeah, this is exactly what Space Station should be doing. Take every fight Radiance would conceivably give you on the left-hand side. 3-on-1, who cares? Take it, because the rest of your team's going to get there in time to be a difference maker.
Adapting for a moment thought he had a 1v1, but it's just not true. Nika is over on the left-hand side of the map, so it's a full 5 stack from Space Station on this side, and they've already gotten the Fury, so yeah, Nika's going to start to back. At this point, there's really not much more for him to do, and he can head over and make sure Benji doesn't just go crazy in that short lane over there, getting farm and pushing those towers. So that'll slow down that push from them a little bit in right. But this has been such a clinic, I feel like, from Space Station on how to use your pressure effectively. They have created such a tremendous lead for Vote. They've taken Cyclone Spin out of this game entirely. I know that Rom got those changes and he's looking good, but some of his susceptibility to this pressure might mean that you can't pull him out every game.
No, I think the early picks are gonna be hard to come by if you're not gonna draft enough pressure around him. It's the exact same mistake that Ghost made earlier on in Game 3. They go Kali jungle, Rom ADC, and they just get absolutely steamrolled early because they just don't have pressure anywhere on the map, and you don't have a jungler that can, or even if you do have pressure in mid or in solo, Benji's had the majority of the pressure over here. It doesn't matter because the majority of the buffs are on the left-hand side. The majority of the invadable buffs are on the left-hand side. Speed's so hard to invade with where it's positioned. So having that be your lowest pressure lane and your jungler being low pressure is just begging the enemy team to jam your red buff over and over and over again, and your purple buff. And at this point, I think it's 6 buffs in a row between purple and red that Space Station has stolen away. And it's probably going to be 8 because Vote just reset, finishes Executioner. He's up a full rage on what Cyclone has right now. And I'd bet pretty good money that he and Cheerio are going to be gunning it down the left-hand side, hunting for that purple.
Hey, Cheerio's already here. Vote's the one late to the party as they set up their position on the left-hand side. And adapting really can't do much. I mean, honestly, he's kept relatively even with Cheerio. This strategy isn't even about necessarily getting Cheerio far ahead of the map. It's about really making sure that this long lane hunter, Cyclone Spin in this case, falls behind, that their relevancy is almost entirely taken out of the game. So now they can continue. They've already grabbed the purple buff. Red buff is spawning too. They zone out adapting. It belongs to them again. We can make it 8 in a row as there's really just not much Radiance can do to contest.
Yeah, this is easy for Space Station at this point. They're up 4K. They can take any fight they want on this left-hand side. It really doesn't matter. I mean, Vote kind of has the option at this point to transition this towards mid, start getting the mid-tier 1. Do we want to try and do something else? Radiance just tried to do a crazy Fire Giant on the right side, but was sniffed out pretty quickly. So Space Station really just are waiting to give Radiance the information on where we're beating you next. That's really all that you can do if you're Radiance, is wait for Space Station to let you know where you'll lose your next fight.
Because right now it feels like a foregone conclusion. I do like the The idea, though, of trying to force something over in right, at this point, I don't think that you can save Cyclone Spin, right? He's too far beneath the water at this point, so you're not dragging him back out. Instead, maybe try and take your relevancy from Benji and activate that. Cheerio engages. Great silence there from Aurora to slow him down, but Cheerio still in the back onto Tings. The fear has to come out, but Dardez's damage is too much. Tings falls right away. Adapting gets a two-man stun underneath the Tier 1 tower, but Rapper can tank it up, drops the ultimate on himself, but doesn't even end up needing it. They burn down the Tier 1 tower, and Radiance, even with some good individual efforts, just cannot answer.
And Cyclone's doing the right thing. You let your team know that you'll see him next year. You know, good luck, man. Hope everything goes well for you. But
Hags maybe have a great summer. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Some hags out of that duo lane, and then you just commit to pushing. You are in that lane until someone comes to kill you, and then once they come to kill you, you respawn in 3 seconds because you're basically level 2, and you start gunning it down again. Because until you get to level 18, 20, you're irrelevant. You just don't do anything right now. The level 15 Rom is going to get ignored in team fights anyways. You may as well put some pressure on the map. He gets the Tier 1. He gets a little bit of gold. He catches up a bit. But expecting Cyclone to be a contributor in the next 5 minutes is very, very optimistic. It's farming time for him.
You'd be asking too much of the young man to try and turn this 15 ROM into much help right now. But that's what the advantage of pressing these fights around the Fury is. You force Radiance to either take the 4v5, give you the objective, or not let Cyclone Spin farm, and none of those selections sound very good to me if I'm on Radiance. They will slowly start up this Oni Fury, but they want the fight more than the Fury, I feel like, at this point. They're trying to bait Radiance in.
And Vote is able to do so much damage at this point. He's actually not that far ahead in the build anymore, because I don't know that he's backed super recently. Only has that extra mace, but the level advantage alone is enough.
The Oni Fury goes down quickly. Great zoning from Nika and Raffer, and really Radiance. It was a half-hearted defense in the first place, and they definitely weren't going to get past all that beefy front line that they've got between Nika and Raffer, so they give it up. Fury belongs to SSG, and this has just been a slow, steady climb up in the lead. I'd love to see the charts. It kind of illustrates it for you, that nice angle up for SSG as opposed to Radiance at this point. But they're grouped up now over near the Fire Giant. At least a couple of them are, but with this back, no way they're going to start up the fight here.
No, but this is where I think you're actually in kind of a weird spot if you're a Space Station, where you're up 5k, you've got a massive experience lead, but with the way that minions scale in Smite, you get so much XP from minions at this point. I mean, look how many levels Cyclone has caught up really quickly all of a sudden.
Yeah.
That's just the way that minions work as they scale into the game. This XP lead isn't going to last that much longer. And so do you try and pull fire? Do you use this incredible lead to your advantage and just force a fight around fire, especially with those Oni waves pushing? The Oni waves are already cleared. You kind of waited too long to reset off that. The easiest way for Radiance back into this game is for you to pull fire and throw a fight there and miss your secure and take too much damage from it. I actually think that leads like this that have been so commanding for the last 22 minutes, but now you've gotten all the tier 1s. Your main advantage is not necessarily in gold, but in XP. I think these are some of the hardest leads to convert on, and I'm curious to see where Spacestation is going to go with it.
They've got some good tools, though, to make it work. I mean, Volt's ultimate, the AoE ult from Nika as well, can buy them some time. Merlin's so great at burning these objectives. It is such a tough call, as you mentioned, because an easy way back in is to throw, but you also do kind of want to strike while the iron's hot, right? Get the most out of your lead if you feel as though it might only decrease in value going forward. And Radiance have done a good job of not giving away too much. There wasn't a whole lot they could do to stop Cyclone Spin from dying over and over again on cooldown, but everyone else stayed about as close as they could in farm all game long. So I think everywhere else on the map, they can feel pretty comfortable fighting.
I mean, you're still at a deficit for sure. It's just not as bad as it was for Cyclone for the majority of the game. But now at this point, I mean, Cyclone, you probably need him to join up because you just can't afford to take a 5-on-4 here.
Well, the Fire Giant being forced by Space Station, as I mentioned, they've got great potential to burn it, but they're not all in committing. Benji takes a ton of damage on the right, but returns as good as he gets towards Nika, so Nika takes some poke as well. Benji regroups with the rest of the squad. That's the dash on cooldown. Spacestation head right back towards the Fire Giant, but they're not starting it up yet. Radiance have done enough to stall them out, and Adapting steps forward, uses the destruction, but that was rarely going to work. Instead, he has to fully disengage.
And Aurora has a not great Dharmic Pillars, walls in that one particular rock very effectively, and that's going to make this team fight hard for Radiance.
Good Taiko drums, though, from Tings, but Raffer, always with his head on a swivel, is able to drop the ult. Cyclone Spin finds a much-needed kill with those snipes. That cuts down Cheerio. Nika gets a second health bar off the back of Sentinel Azus, but Cyclone Spin rolls in, feeling himself a bit, trying to keep up the aggression. Now Adapting closes the gap, finds the stun, but not the kill. It's really only Benji that can keep up the chase, but Tings comes in as well to try and put out some damage. Radiance only get one pick, but aggro, this is what you were talking about. It's so hard to confirm these kinds of leads.
Yeah, just a really weird fight from top to bottom. An odd initiation from Adapting that really doesn't pay off right away. Then a really sloppy chase in from Space Station where Cheerio just ends up taking way too much damage off the top.
Great bait, though, from Vote and from Dardes. They force Benji to step back in, but even with that great setup, they didn't quite have the burn potential to kill him that quickly. Benji will take his back, has teleport upgraded now, so he should be able to TP right back in, but Radiance might be able to let him know it's not quite so urgent. Adapting takes a ton of damage, does not have the ultimate yet, so he has to disengage. Benji drops his ultimate, but a two-man knock-up from Nike means the fight can turn around. Dharmic Pillars much better this time around, boxing in everyone, and Radiance able to disengage.
Man, that's just awkward right now. Dardes and Vote have a really good idea. I like the idea to try and fake the two-man. I don't know if they really could have. I mean, if they have all the time in the world, they probably get to two-man that FG. And if only Benji shows up, which is what happened, you try and kill him. They're just not able to do so. Dardes really just a little bit late on that Vortex pull off of the Kepri Abduct. That probably should have been a kill on Adapting, but I think Dardes misprioritized the abilities in that order. You kind of want to go 2-1, not 1-2 in that position, and that lets Adapting escape. And now they finally get to reset and get to buy a little bit more, but we just don't see that lead anymore for Vote. Eventually, you hit level 20 in Smite, especially as a carry player that's just willing to split out the map and farm out these side waves, and you do it pretty quickly. That's exactly what happened for Cyclone Spin, and it's especially effective for ADCs because their items are so cheap in comparison to, say, a mid laner who would fall really far behind, and we have to spend, 3 million gold in comparison to your 2,000, 2,100, 2,200 items. They're so cheap that you get those pretty quickly at this point in the game because of how much minion waves give you late game.
That time Cyclone Spin was able to spend over their power farming, man, that was huge for them. It's brought them back in, but I don't want to make it sound as though SSG aren't still in the driver's seat here. A little bit ahead is Dardes over Tings. They still have that advantage. Slightly ahead is Cheerio over Adapting, so they could certainly still come into these fights favorable, and it looks like they agree. They start up the Fire Giant, showing Cheerio's presence over in right. Raffer gets the Abduct onto Benji. That's some free poke, but they drop the Fire Giant, start up Pyromancer instead, and all the while, Radiance have not yet budged. They pop the Frenzy and go in aggressively, dropping the Dharmic Pillars around the Pyromancer. Radiance get the objective. Raffer abducts one back in. The Taiko drums force him to use the ultimate on himself. Cheerio and Nika both dive to the back, but it is still not enough, and Adapting wants the reset, can't find it. Dardes instead gets the kill, and Radiance lose their jungler.
Man, a really heavy commit from Radiance all over the Pyromancer, which is just a bit of an odd one. I mean, I get that you don't want to just start giving everything up, but using the Dharmic Pillars, your Frenzy, your Rom ult, I mean, all of that is an investment into the Pyromancer, and Raffer is just so willing to insta-die in that fight. He abducts in trying to steal Pyro, and ends up plucking Aurora in. But that's going to really put him in danger, but he has a really good Kepri ult on himself. Relic usage was solid, and Adapting, again, takes the bait and goes for the support.
Benji shows up to the right, but Nika zones him out. Fire Giant has been started, and Raffer's taken a ton of free damage, so even though Radiance don't have the numbers, maybe it's still a good fight. Benji gets some good damage, so does Tings. Raffer falls right away to make it a 1-for-1. Adapting will be back before Raffer So maybe this has flipped a bit, and Radiance, with the numbers advantage, could be the one starting up the FG. This has been odd, though, hasn't it? This whole last 8.5 minutes or so from SSG, they haven't seemed clear on how to make the most use of their lead here.
No, they really haven't. And Raffer just basically hard inted on that Fire Giant. He walks into the fire towards the Raiju bounce when he's already taken so much damage from the FG. His carries are way ahead of him. They pulled off fire a good 5 seconds ago, and Raffer's still in the pit tanking up that damage, and it just ends up taking way too much from the objectives. So that's going to force a reset. At this point, we're probably looking at waiting until Oni Fury respawns in 155, and then trying to take another fight around that, like we saw in the last game.
Yeah, and if Cyclone Spin's willing to walk in and die alongside the Fury, it'll be a nice fight for SSG, but I doubt we'll be seeing that same mistake from Cyclone Spin twice in a row.
By the way, what is Vote spending his gold on? He's been sitting with Hunter's Blessing for like 8 minutes. Cyclone has finished his build. He's now ahead of Vote in the build. I have no idea what Vote is spending the gold on to not have a 6th item at this point.
He only has 1,400 gold in hand. Even with selling Hunter's Blessing, he'd be even under 2K. He wouldn't be able to finish from here. So yeah, I don't know what's been going on, but suddenly Cyclone Spin has caught all the way back up and reclaimed a sort of lead. He's even got a crit build too with the Wind Demon Rage and the Titan's Bane finish, so he'll get some good value onto these backline carries.
I mean, Vote has been going a lot of Odysseus Bow. Wouldn't be surprised to see him go for that. Nice blink from Cherry gets him out of a clean, dazzling offensive start there from Benji.
Another odd one adapting once Cheerio gets the beads out from him. Meanwhile, the rest of Space Station are grouping up around that Tier 2 tower in right. Frenzy popped, and they dropped the Dharmic Pillar, so the Tier 2 tower goes down, but Raffer, again, is stuck in a bad spot, uses that Scarab's Blessing to stay alive, and is able to make it out of there. Benji dashes in, but Raffer resets. Adapting has to use his ultimate in the back line, but Radiance can't do much more here. In fact, they abduct Benji back in, and he pops like a balloon. Vote gets the kill, and Space Station have the numbers advantage.
Man, this is just so weird. I don't know if it's the end of the day, we've just been passing a lot today, Finch, or what, but I just can't make rhyme or reason of where these fights are going or why they're going. Another heavy commit from Radiance. They think that they've got a good fight opportunity because Cherio's in mid, and they know that he's pretty separate from that fight, but the Dharmic Pillars really don't end up doing quite that much. Tings resets Raffer when we know that he's got plenty of time left on that Scarab's Blessing buff. Just a weird one, man. Cyclone is, starting every single fight with that ROM ult, probably feeling like he's going to be able to get it back pretty quickly, but it's not like it's a searing pain from Ra. You get it back more quickly now because of the arrow buff, but it's not a 20-second cooldown ultimate. You're still waiting 45, 50 seconds. I don't know that I've loved his usage of it this game.
It's interesting. We saw that a lot, I feel like, in Season 4 and 5, somewhere around in there, where teams were starting fights off with that ROM ult because they were able to build so much power, it felt like, in their builds, and it was just a bunch of free damage, essentially, at the start of the fight. But these have not been ROM ult off the back of, guaranteed CC or anything either, right? They've just been kind of ulting, hoping they'll be boxed into the Dharmic Pillars. But Vote will just jump over it. Dardez will flicker out. Raffer has proven he doesn't care all that much. I mean, he's willing to die because he knows he's getting good trades out of it. I'm with you, man. It's not been a ton of value out of them.
No, you got to get more than that. I mean, at this point, the fact that the laning phase was so rough doesn't matter anymore. You're at even with where Vote is. I think that you got to see a little bit more out of that ROM pick.
Well, SSG still have Fire Giants. They'll do a 3-2 split. Benji uses the ultimate, forces Cheerio to use his. Not a bad trade. Dharmic Pillars catches 3 members on the edge of the tower. Big crits from Vote forces a roar back. And the Phoenixes do look a bit worse for wear, but they're still standing.
I mean, that Volcanic Lightning being down is huge, and the cooldown for Benji is so low on Dazzling Offensive that's such a great trade for Radiance. No beads were up for Cheerio at the time, so he didn't really have a choice.
Both Phoenixes under threat now, but adapting, sticking to Nika well, puts in the damage and forces him back. Ting's under duress, has to use the Taiko drums in order to escape, and that's all it takes. Left side Phoenix will end up falling. Relentless from SSG on that Phoenix Siege. They split perfectly, and Radiance couldn't quite answer.
Wonder if Nika, it looks like he is teleporting back right now actually has a pretty good opportunity to maybe get a flank off on this left-hand side. I was thinking about maybe he's pushing up, maybe you would push up right and get a minion wave there, but that would take a long period of time, and you don't really want to let Radiance breathe for that long.
Mid Phoenix already low too as a result of the 3-2 split. Another good Dharmic Pillars, and Dardes is isolated. Adapting is here with them. This is what they've been waiting for all game, but the Scarab's Blessing nullifies it all. Raph are able to bring them back. Cheerio gets the kill onto Adapting, but Tings blows up the Khepri. Not the greatest trade, but now Benji in trouble. The backline of Space Station team up to take him down. Cheerio lockdown, and Cyclone Spin gets a return kill, a 2 for 2, but Radiance don't have that much still available as Tings barely gets away from Nika.
They still have Vote, and Vote is your DPS on this Phoenix. Mid Phoenix will fall, but I think Radiance have done enough to extend this game a little bit longer.
I feel like the Khepri pick is too much for Radiance here, Aggro. What's your read on it? I mean, even when Adapting has Dardes essentially all alone on the side of a fight, that's got to be the dream for this Kali, I think. It's still not enough.
It's just that Khepri, man, I agree. It is such a difference maker for Space Station. It seems like so many teams have such trouble fighting around it effectively. I mean, you saw that team fight recap. Radiance did way more damage that fight. They killed Dardes 1.5 times. Dardes was low, got through both relics, killed him, and then still nearly killed him again, got him pretty low, but Dardes is just doing so much damage at this point on this Merlin pick that even if he were to die quickly, you'd feel like he's probably getting good enough value out of this selection. Yeah. But when he gets 2 life bars at it, it's hard to beat that.
They're really their only backline potential for getting to them is on Adapting. That's part of the struggle, especially because Benji so often has to use Dazzling Offensive earlier on in the engagement as a deterrent. I think that's what the plan is with this ultimate from Cyclone Spin, right, is to add a little bit to lower the kill threshold essentially onto Dardes in the back and make that easier, but they haven't really been able to use the ultimate in that case either in most of these team fights.
Yeah, it's been kind of hard because you're really relying on these Dharmic Pillars to be your initiator on Radiance, and Aurora's found some good ones, some rough ones, but the last few have been pretty solid. But then it's kind of Aurora's job to waltz around and hold Raffer's hand. Just follow Raffer in these team fights until someone's getting low, and then you ohm the Khepri and you hope really hard that your team kills whoever they needed to kill before that ohm expires.
It's kind of a fatty wave here by the Titan. It's bringing it down quite low. Mid and left Phoenix are down, so the Titan obviously not regenning right now, down to below 6,000 HP, and they're letting Benji solo clear it because he's the one that can TP back, but it's going to be hard work for the Alma to keep these waves pushed out. Meanwhile, SSG start up the Fire Giant. Aurora abducted back in, so they pull off it for a moment, put in damage. Dharmic Pillars doesn't find much. Cyclone Spin ults right away, hits one shot, but not much else from it. And now Radiance on the back foot, stuck in a bad engagement, so Raffer steps forward, finds the abduction to Aurora again. Cheerio in the back line looking for Cyclone Spin. The Tycho drums come through, and Adapting is able to get the kill, but Nika's going to try and stick to Tings here in this spot. Vote drops the Suns as well. They will not allow the Ryzen to escape, and Space Station making 1 for 1.
Cyclone and Adapting nearly killed, but a sick Tycho drums from Ting saves their life, and ends up pretty convenient that they both get back to base in time to clear 2 big fire waves that are coming in.
Benji trying to make his way in, but that's such a great route to cut out all of his momentum. He dies right away. Aurora now in the same trouble, pulled back in by the Void Stance, rooted by Raffer yet again, and this kill certainly will happen. It's a double. Adapting now jumping on the backside, but everyone is so healthy. No way he finds the reset. A perfect abduct, and Vote gets the triple. It's suddenly just Cyclone Spin left, and he's not going to be enough here, Aggro. I think that's just the game.
Space Station continues their winning streak. What is this, 5 sets in a row that they've won now?
Man.
They were at 3-3 if memory serves, and they're about to be 8-3. Good time to get hot going into the playoffs.
I like the idea there from Cyclone Spin, roll in and try and find a kill, but it's just not happening. In the end, it's Space Station that closed this one out 2-1 over Radiance. And I know that game 1 from Radiance, it was 45 minutes. They were able to find a big win, but didn't it kind of feel like Space Station were playing a bit better for most of this set? I mean, this is a really strong team right now, this Space Station squad. You got to be on the lookout for them.
Yeah, Zap said after losing to them last week, he thinks they're the best team in the league right now, that they're the team to watch out for, and the standings are going to reflect that. I still think that the middle, we kind of entered the twilight zone for a little bit in this game. There was like a 10-minute stretch where everything got really weird and distorted and ugly for
Agreed.
a little
We're
bit.
upside down.
then we righted the ship and got back to good, clean Smite, and Space Station ends up realizing that, oh yeah, we got a huge lead this game. Maybe we mess around and win, and ultimately do just that.
It ends up working. I feel like what started to become a weakness for Radiance is that long lane and the ability to bully out Cyclone. They got to figure that one out. But congrats to SSG off a big win. Let's get it back over to the desk to break it down.
Well, thank you so much, Finch. And yeah, I mean, it really does come down. That last game feels a lot more like SSG have a lot of control on it. And even at the end there, and Mifflin, maybe you can help me figure this one out, but it feels like Radiance just kind of ran into that last fight one by one by one. Like, they just kept going in one at a time and ultimately kind of help SSG win that game.
It seemed like maybe they had just lost a little bit of focus as the set goes on, but I think we really got to give credit to the true leader of SSG that game. In the pregame interview with Nika, Finch says to him, so what's your plan? You going to run it down the duo lane, trying to exploit that? Games 1 and 2, SSG don't do it. Game 3, Nika flashes back to the interview. He says, hey man, maybe we do just run down, cycle, and spin. And they absolutely do. Removing them from the early game almost completely, confirming so many objectives, getting themselves a lead. Finch gets MVP for me.
I was going to say, it sounds like, you know, there's like maybe a hint of Nika being MVP, but realistically, Finch, maybe the unknown best coach coming in for Space Station Gaming. And realistically, it has been this, and this is where we've seen Radiance falter a lot of the time lately, has been in this duo lane. And you can maybe look at the kill onto Aurora maybe being prominent, but it has been stopping Cyclone Spin from feeling as prominent as you would expect out of a ROM throughout that game. It made it a lot easier for the entire team to just kind of take the reins and roll with it.
Yeah, Kali gets off to a fantastic start, but then Sherio engages the Finch strat of run it down duo, shuts down Cyclone Spin, establishes an early 2 to 3 level lead despite Kali getting first blood at, what was it, exactly 1 minute? I mean, that's just nuts play from SSG. They do flounder a little bit at that 20-minute mark. They had about an 8,000 gold lead, and for 10 full minutes, they just kind of meander throughout the map, not really doing anything with it. Maybe that's that upside-down, topsy-turvy phase of the game that Aggro was alluding to earlier. But SSG, they really do, overall, they look like the better team today.
And I think the clean play, well, is going to be reflected in something that we'll see when the standings come through because, well, they've been winning a lot lately, not just against Radiance here in a 2-1 fashion, but against a lot of these other teams. And honestly, it's going to be interesting to see, especially in their post-game thoughts, where they think it's coming from because it kind of feels like as a whole, the minute they stop trying to pick the main meta picks that everybody else was picking, SSG started to step ahead. I mean, they pulled out the Hera, and that, I think, was the beginning of what has become kind of a beautiful story for them.
Yeah, the Hera, the Afro, the Khepri, all of these picks, really, Afro a little bit less so, Hera and Khepri, though, completely SSG focused. I mean, the second that Radiance forgot that they were banning out Khepri's game 1 and 2, I think to myself, well, maybe that's a little bit of a throw, and immediately we see that it is because Raffer gets probably the most impactful game of the set here today, where he's just able to keep his team alive. Dardes constantly under aggression. Doesn't matter, Scarab's Blessing. Pele wants to dive the backline, doesn't have death immunity, doesn't matter, Scarab's Blessing.
I mean, even in the past, we've mentioned, I like when Sanguine pick up the Khepri, that usually it is that, hey, try to force his ult out of him, but even when they forced the ult out of Raffer, didn't seem to phase him too much. In fact, maybe left SSG off in a better state because he got that heal coming through. In fact, we can find out how he felt about it as we jump down to Finch, who actually has Raffer standing by to see how they feel after this big win.
Thanks, Score. I am indeed here with Raffer. Kind of feels like the big hero of that third game. Talk to me a little bit about the Khepri pick and how happy you were to see that one available and how important the res in particular was in that third game.
It's just always good to have two lives, you know. I know I like to be focused a lot, so I just usually tend to go Khepri just to res myself.
Well, another question about that third game. It looks like you all did start to put a lot more pressure onto Cyclone Spin in that third game. Was that just a result of the way that the drafts went, or was that a conversation in between the second and third game?
It just kind of happened, like it's always one of the legit strats to do, to shut down the dual lane, but it was kind of the spur of the moment. We should have helped Nika a tiny bit more, but we knew we could just hold on for life whilst we pressure the other side of the map, and we could just go from there. Maybe if we rotated a bit earlier to the solo side of the map, the game would have been a lot cleaner, but it wasn't too messy. It was an okay game, in my opinion.
I agree. I know things got a little bit weird around that Fire Giant for a little bit, but you all largely, I think, cleaned that one up. Well, talk to me about your team's flexibility in general. I feel like Dardez's Hera, right, or your Capri, or the fact that Cheerio plays so many odd picks, it makes it so hard for teams to prep against you all. How valuable do you feel like that flexibility is for your squad?
I think it's very valuable. I don't even know who... If I was against us, I wouldn't know what to ban. And I know everything we do, It's just every player is flexible. I'm obviously not going to say what I'd recommend other teams to do, but I'm just really happy at the position we're in. There's not much they can do. They just have to play better than us on the day. I think that's what it comes down to. It's nothing to do with drafting.
Well, there aren't a lot of teams playing better than you guys on the day right now, up there at the top of the standings. Congrats, Raffer, on the big win, my man. Always nice to talk to you. I'll get it back over to the desk, though, have them close things out from here.
Well, he says it appropriately. Wouldn't know who to ban, which I think is pretty accurate when it comes down to SSG. Again, I mentioned Kali maybe comes to mind when I think of Cheerio, but so does something like the Jungle Athena. Not a lot of people are running that one. Not a lot of people are banning that one either. It'd take a lot to say, hey guys, let's not ban the Aphrodite away. Let's go for something like that. And I think that is a lot of their strength, Mifflin.
I mean, I don't want to help out all the other teams because I am an SSG fan. Well, let me go ahead and say it straight and plain for every single team listening right now. Don't let Raffer get Khepri. My man is absolutely nuts on that pick. He didn't say it himself, so I will say it for him. Khepri good, Raffer good. Don't let that happen again.
Raffer good. I think, again, the two-time being able to bring up some of those trophies is nice for him. Hold the hammer above his head. Well, that's not quite what Raffer did, but we can move on from there. SSG, the team now standing up at the top. Not a very big margin between first and second. Could very easily be one match that could knock them down to be tied once again with someone like Sanguine or Ghost. And then right behind... well, the two teams that are tied for second are two teams tied for third in Radiance and Knights. And then, oh, by the way, two teams tied for fourth in E-United and Renegades. Out of all of it, 7 teams in the league are right next to each other, and Obey is right in that area where, again, playoffs are still feasible. They just require a lot of losses to come up and also need a lot of wins. So they need, I think, E-United to start tomorrow off with a loss up against Sanguine, but they also need to beat Spacestation Gaming, which, as we just saw, is not necessarily an easily done feat. The Sunday's looking pretty packed, Mifflin. How are you feeling about it?
Man, Obey's definitely got my eyes on them, right? The underdog story is so there. They need to find the next 3 game wins. They need to hope that E-United lose at least 2 of their games, and then they match up on the head-to-head, I believe. But that's a crazy timeline to think about. If anyone's going to be watching the first set tomorrow, it's probably going to be Obey, and their eyes going to be glued to it, just praying for that E-United L.
I mean, things like that make the big difference. Again, here at the end of Week 8, I believe, we are looking at playoffs more than ever. A lot of these teams, that's what they're playing for. That's where the points are going to be for the entire year. And that's where things start to get a little hairy. The fight for first right now has been taken over by SSG. But from Mifflin, from myself, from everyone in production, thank you all for watching. Challenger Circuit games are going to be coming on after this, but SBL will be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. More games you don't want to miss. So with that, we can peach it.